Welcome to Refused Flank, a wargaming podcast exploring the intersection of competitive excellence and narrative storytelling potential.
I am ready.
All right, we are rolling. Hey everybody, this is Refused Flank. I'm Cam.
And I'm Grant.
And today we are going to be reviewing the 6th edition Army book of the Dwarfs. We did a poll and some of you guys responded and we asked, do you want us to review the 6.5, the 6.0, or both as a comparison kind of review? The poll told us that the majority of people wanted to see a comparative review of the 6th ed original book and the 6.5 book. And we are going to do that, but we figured it'd be easier if we laid down a sort of baseline by reviewing the original 6th ed book first. And then our next episode will be a comparison of the 6.5 changes compared to the 6.0 change book itself. And the reason that we're doing it that way is because we're about to do a battle report between greenskins and dwarfs. And we're going to be using the original dwarf book for that. So we figured that would be the one to just do the more full kind of review for as our standard Army book review episode, and then bring the comparison after that. Anything to add, Grant?
No, I think that makes as much sense as it could to anybody. I guess just add in that during that next episode, we'll probably talk about the comparison. I think there is arguments online of like which one is more legit. Anyone who I think is new to Warhammer Fantasy 6th, but they want to play dwarves, I feel like everybody's asking, which book should I use?
Right. Is very reasonable question to be asking.
Right. So maybe we'll explore that a little bit and what we think would be best or worse. Or
at least the reasons for both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
You can make up your own mind, I suppose.
Indeed.
But I'm really excited for this one. Dwarfs were my sort of dream army as a kid. I didn't own any. In fact, my friend Nick decided he was going to play dwarfs, so I kind of had to put that on the sideline when we were kids. As I've mentioned in past episodes, we didn't really get into Warhammer Fantasy that much. We were playing more Lord of the Rings strategy battle game and 40K at the time, so it didn't end up being that big of a deal. I didn't amass much of any army at that point in my life, but it was really exciting to come back now as we've sort of had this resurrection of Warhammer Fantasy 6th edition, and I've had the opportunity to collect this army. And just looking at the sculpts from this era, a lot of the 6th ed metal sculpts are just some of the most beautiful models, I think. And the
very
imagery,
characterful.
So characterful. So I just always was in love with them, always dreamed of having an army. And then big shout out to my friend Dave, who sold me a huge amount of these models at a very reasonable price a couple of years ago, really helped that dream come true. So this is like one of my most prized armies, and I'm not very good with it. I think my win rate is like 2 wins, 10 losses or something like that from our recent slow grow campaign.
I don't know if that's true, but maybe.
I only won 2 games in that campaign.
Did you?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we played something like 12 games.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but don't let that color your opinion of this book. But anyways, so I'm just excited. I love this book, love the lore, love the models. So I'm excited to dive in. As we've done in past episodes, where we're doing Army book reviews, we will talk a little bit about the lore, the narrative potential that the book provides, go through the Army special rules, each unit individually, kind of talk about what they bring to the table, what kind of role they play in the Army, and then round it out with some discussion of our favorite art and just our overview conclusions of the book itself.
For sure.
Any final intro thoughts before we dive into narrative?
Let's jump right in.
Love it.
What stands out to you in the background of dwarves or dwarfs?
Yes, so I think that was actually my first point.
Yeah.
So is it dwarfs with an F or is it dwarves with a V? If you look at the front of the book, it's clearly dwarfs with an F. There's a common, I think, I don't want to call it a mistake, but Tolkien is the one who coined dwarves plural with a V, even though he still used dwarf with an F singular. But so that's a common thing. People will kind of mix and match. It is honestly easier to say dwarves rather than dwarfs.
I think so, yeah.
So I don't blame Tolkien. He was a linguist and really interested in languages. And so I think I don't blame him for making the change because it just rolls off the tongue a little easier. But if you're a purist or a longbeard, as the case may be, you might want to say dwarfs just to be correct in the literal sense of the term. But hopefully nobody's giving you grief for saying dwarves. But technically, it is dwarfs. So that's good. We got that out of the way. I'll probably end up accidentally saying both throughout this.
Me too. We'll see. So don't put it in the book, listeners.
Yes.
Thanks.
Well said. But overall, I absolutely love how the lore is portrayed in this book. It's very much in line with a lot of the other 6th ed army book lore where there's a lot of it that's being portrayed through, quote, primary sources, where there's like letters from a empire emissary back to the emperor and things like that. There's a lot of the info at the beginning of the book and throughout as it's explaining the unit types is provided by Durgrim Redmane, who's an old hammerer just hanging out in a tavern talking to all the other dwarfs about the good old days and when he was a young beardling and things like that. And he gives you the lowdown on all the different unit types. And doing that is just so much more interesting and characterful, I think, than just a kind of bare bones description of the Hammerers are a unit that is a bodyguard of the king.
They are the elite of the elite. They guard the king. They are resolute and will never run away from anything.
Yeah, so instead we have Redmane saying, I'm a hammerer and it's because of me and my folk that the Hammerers even exist. And then he goes on to tell the story of like how there was this invasion and the king was about to die, but then the smiths of the hold took their hammers and turned from their anvils and attacked the goblins and drove them back and saved the king. And so you get all these little like lore tidbits along with it that I think is a lot of fun. So alongside that, I think you also just get a sense of the culture and aspect of the dwarfs and like how they interact, how they talk, and it's just really flavorful to read about your army in those terms, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree 110%. Some of the parts that kind of stuck out to me just in general was just this for me, dwarves almost personify like pride, maybe, in a little bit. They're so haughty and in a different way from elves. Like they're grounded. Elves are like, of course I'm better than you. Whereas dwarves would be like, oh, maybe you're better than me at that, but we're dwarves and we're really good at X, Y, and Z, and we do it this way, and that's the right way to do it. And I don't know. It just seeps through the entire book and then into descriptions, even down to certain rune kind of lore bits and mobs there that I thought was cool. So it like what was one that stood out to me? Like talking about the rune of forging, which is I think a pretty popular one. We'll get into it later, but it's like when making a cannon, with each hammer blow an engineer strikes, a runesmith must recite a special litany, and it can take weeks to complete. And I just like this idea of this dude who's literally, I don't know how he's doing it for weeks straight, but we'll just go with it. It's fantasy, right? He's just literally screaming and hitting a hammer. Maybe not screaming, but he's talking, he's reciting something, and it's imbuing it with power and magic and stuff like that. I'm like, oh wow, that's just so over the top and kind of cool. I don't know. That's where the fantasy comes out to me in those little bits. Yeah,
and I think it's that approach to life that makes the dwarfs feel like they have right to say that they're the best at all these things because they know they put in all this hard work and effort and et cetera, et cetera. I think it's fascinating how the book kind of portrays the dwarfs as on the downturn of their civilization. They've already peaked. They've been through their golden age. A lot of their holds are now taken over by greenskins and Skaven and things like that. Their population is dwindling. It talks about how every battle is like a big danger because every loss that they have is driving them further and further towards extinction. But there's this stoic determination that I think comes alongside that where we've been here for so long and like we're not going to give up. And it even says like a lot of the dwarves still believe that they're going to come back. There's going to be a new golden age and they're fighting to reclaim these holds. And so I think that as a dwarf player really gives you this sort of motivation and a lot of interesting ideas for what's driving your particular clan or hold to do things. Are you trying to recapture a hold that was taken? Are you trying to make relationships with other people outside of the mountains where it's safer or something like that? And so there's just a lot of different ways you can go, but you sort of get that imperative, that directive as a dwarf player of we're fighting for survival and we have all these cool technologies and we're really skilled at what we're doing, but there's not a lot of us. And so we really have to work with our scarce resources in order to make this all work.
I think, too, going along with that, just their determination, but it also at the same time provides really good reasons in the lore for the dwarves to be fighting everyone.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes this kind of comes off as a good guy army, but this good guy army hates one of the other super good guy armies of the high elves, and they have this whole war of the beard / war of vengeance, I think, depending on who it is. And that's like, oh yeah, no, ever since that happened, like 2,000 years ago, we're not on speaking terms. Empire, they're just kind of the youngling race, manling, sorry. and they're like, oh, we're just better than them in every way. They don't know what they're doing. They made black powder, but it's because we shared
they kind
it
of
with
regret that we did that.
Right.
And so maybe we're going to, I think they even say somewhere in the book, I'm pretty sure it might be Redmayne says it when he's talking about the cans, and he's like, it's only amount of time before they're going to turn the gunpowder back on us.
Right.
We know it, kind of
So
thing.
it's just one of those things where it's like, I think they have they're fighting for survival, and they're kind of a traditionally, at least I think you could pair them with a lot of the human and elf factions and be like, oh, they're standing against chaos or whatever.
Yeah, which they have done throughout their history.
Right.
But,
and they will, but at the same time, it's like, but if you cross them, that's going in the book.
Absolutely.
And then that's that whole, I didn't want to jump to the book because I feel like the book is so cool and iconic, and it's joked about almost. But
it definitely is a meme now, yeah.
Right, but they have this huge book of grudges where they literally write down all the wrongs that have ever been done, and they have to like resolve these grudges or whatever. And wars are declared over these types of things, and just this honor, right, or whatever, and how people are treated and perceived. And it's just like, oh no, we're not going to deal with that. Or isn't it the War of the Beard? I think I read. If it might have been in this book, I can't remember if I'm mixing it up with the 6.5, but it's like some diplomats went out to the High Elves and they execute them, and they're all like, so like 3 guys, and they're like, oh, we're just going to start a war of annihilation against them now. And it's just like, wow, just spirals out because they're so set in their ways, so set in like what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. We do it this way. We don't change.
Right. Once we've made the decision that that's what happened, that is now what happened. Whether we find out we were wrong later, we wouldn't, because we weren't. So yeah, that absolutely.
They're inflexible in character, but also like in game too.
Yeah, which I love. That there's that strong connection between how they are as a people and a culture and how they actually play on the tabletop. I always love to see that. I also like how the Book of Grudges is portrayed in the lore in this army book, because they actually have 2 sections that are excerpts from the book. And so it's just like the entries that are put in the book on the different years. And so you get this sort of rolling history, but through the lens of how people have wronged them and the things that they're asking for and the things that they owe other people and things like that. So you have mentions of like the treachery of the elves, but then also, oh, the next holdover wanted to borrow some steamrollers, but now they haven't given them back. Like you see 12 entries later, like they still haven't given our steamrollers back. Like what the heck?
Yeah.
And so you get this, again, it's just much more interesting to have it sort of emerge out of reading the actual excerpt of the Book of Grudges rather than just a paragraph explaining the Book of Grudges.
Right.
And so, yeah, I really appreciate
Show,
that.
don't tell, or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
exactly that. And I think, it said something like every half century dwarfs will come from all the holds to the High King and Karaza Karak. I don't know. That's it. Whoa, I've never
I think
said that out
sounded
loud either.
really
All
good.
Right. I think it says the dwarf language sounds like thunder. So we have the Karaza Karak.
There you go.
Something like that.
That sounded really good.
But anyway, so everybody sends their emissary to the High King so that they can read out, here are the grudges that we've resolved, here are the new grudges that have been placed against us, etc. And then all of those updates are made to the Book of Grudges. So I like that there is also that, like the dwarfs, for them, it's this sort of idea of honor. We're doing this because we want to resolve them. Right. And once we've resolved it and you've paid your debt by us doing whatever we needed to do, then we can be friends again.
Right.
Like we're not going to hold it against you after that necessarily.
It's like a legalistic way to deal with wrongs.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we hate you. But now, like, hey, you did this, so we're cool now.
Yep.
It's just very transactional almost. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. And like you said, it just plays right into exactly how the army feels on the tabletop. So love that. And there's just so many other little tidbits. I'll just throw out a couple more of things that I saw as I was going through. There's this random term that I think, again, Redmayne throws out when he's talking to the other dwarfs in the tavern explaining things, but it's Nolengram. I have no idea how you pronounce that, but it's this idea of respecting a dwarf for the length of his beard, which is equated in dwarf society with their experience and wisdom because they're older, because of how long their beard is, kind of a thing. And so just getting that little word just like brings, again, the culture to life. And of course, that applies to longbeards in particular, because they're the ones that are the oldest dwarfs. And this is one of my favorite special rules just because of how fluffy and goofy it is, but they're immune to panic. We'll get to that when we get to the units, but they describe it in the funniest way. So the reason that they have immune to panic is because longbeards expect the worst and spend a long time grumbling about the inadequacies of dwarfs/weapons/goblins these days, as they're not as brave/well-made/scary as they were in the olden days. And it takes a lot to unsettle a Longbeard from a good grumble.
Right.
So it's not even that they're like not scared. They're just busy grumbling. And so when people are fleeing on either side of them, they're just like, yeah, of course, these kids these days, they're just running at the first sight of trouble.
Yeah, the trolls we fought 50 years ago were twice as big.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. I love a lot of the descriptions of that too. I think there's all those little fluff bits rather from Redmayne. Like he talks about, like, he just interjects randomly.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be like, oh yeah, this pipe weed I'm smoking while I'm telling you a story, this is garbage. Like, I've smoked hay that's better than this weed. This is garbage. Just get it out of here. You know, just throws it in there as he's like telling you a story about a dwarf from, I don't know, whatever ago.
Yeah,
but,
he's just dripping with flavor. I love it.
Another cool thing I like about them before we move on, and maybe this is getting too close to a unit, that whole idea of like the Slayer Oath too, and this idea of like, if you're dishonored or whatever, you failed in some way, you can take this oath, which is like, you're just gonna, I guess, cut your hair into a mohawk, dye it orange, and then go on a suicide quest, basically, right, until you die. And I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that's, again, something that Redmayne fills us in on the details, because he talked to a Slayer who told him about the original Slayer, and then you get the whole story of this guy was supposed to be protecting a prince, and the prince died, and so then he dyed his hair in the color of the prince's hair, which was this red, and so now all other Slayers, when they take the Slayer Oath, just continue to do that from that myth of how this all started. But yeah, absolutely, it's cool that to have a unit that has that evocative and kind of filled out of lore behind why they are the way that they are.
And I can't think of any other unit in fantasy that has that quite, beyond just they're crazy, because they're not crazy. They're like very intentionally like
in a similar way as the Book of Grudges, like they have an oath that they now need to fulfill because they failed to fulfill a different oath, kind of thing. Yeah, so really cool. Another super unique narrative thing with the dwarfs is just how they interact with magic. They're the only army in the old world that doesn't have wizards of some kind. That's true, right?
I think so.
So there is, we'll talk about it with the Anvil of Doom. You can cast some spells in this version of the book, but by and large, they have no magic, and they mostly have anti-magic. And so it's cool that they just brought a twist to this, but then made it dwarfy. So they still have magic items through runes, like you talked about earlier with the cannon. And so they have these runesmiths that can cast runes into the different weapons and armor and talismans that they're making to imbue them with power. But then for the dwarfs, that's a much more contained version of magic, rather than, I think Redmayne even says, it flowing all over the place on the winds of magic. Like, we don't want that nonsense. So we need it to be like structured and in something. And so yeah, again, just feels very dwarfy, but creates a really cool system in the game as well that then makes the army feel a little bit different than other armies.
And it goes back to that whole, this is a dying civilization, so you have that whole narrative tidbit of like, some of these runes people don't know how to make anymore. So it's like, the master rune of, I don't know, Grungi or something. Yeah. Kind of pulled that one out of nowhere. But I think that exists. Like, who can make that anymore? Maybe there's like 2 runesmiths or rune lords in the entire world that know how to make that rune, and it's like they can't be asked to do it that often or whatever, because it takes 7 weeks of him hitting his hammer and doing an incantation or whatever. But it's just I just think that's cool. It's almost like a lost knowledge sort of thing. They're declining in their ability over time to get these runes going. But again, then there's that positive side with maybe we'll come back and, you know, have that renaissance.
Yeah, and so there are still young runesmiths trying to learn and things like that, young engineers trying to make new things, all of those as
much to the chagrin of the older dwarves.
Exactly, which is so great. But the runes also just give a cool modeling opportunity. I think if you sometimes like, I don't know what to paint on this banner. Well, now, like, if you're going to put the rune of battle on the banner, then paint the rune of battle, because it literally shows you in all the rune entries what the actual rune is for the rune. So if you're doing like a combination, you could do a few different runes and that sort of thing. But that's one thing I did with my Longbeard's banner. They have like an open book at the top of the pole. And so I just drew painted the rune of battle in there. And so it's just a nice little lore thing to be able to implement to give you some direction with how you're painting and modeling your army. But you could try to do that with other weapons and things. I think it'd be fun. I haven't actually done this, but to go through and look at some of the sculpted runes on some of the character weapons and see if they relate specifically to some of the ones in the book.
Like if there's a rune of cleaving or something on
that would be
somebody's
fun.
axe.
And then just force myself to only take those runes with that model.
I do
Pure
like,
WYSIWYG.
I do like books too that add. This isn't the only book that does it, but books that have stuff about language
Yes. Oh,
and
man.
all that written up. Now, the Lizardmen book had a bunch of stuff that I don't think we talked about, but they have some glyphs explaining some words, and I thought that was fun. This has quite a bit.
It's like 2.5 pages or something. Yeah.
On how their language just works. So you could like not really learn Dwarfish or whatever, but you could get a lot done and add that to your modeling and painting and adding that into banners or whatever if you wanted to say something almost in the Dwarvish tongue, which I always think is kind of fun when you do that, integrate their own language into the models or whatever.
Yeah, and then you can name your magic weapon something that sounds dwarfish. You don't just have to ask ChatGPT to make up a dwarf name. You can feel like you came up with it using the original source document kind of thing. But this is something I have used for my character names in my army. So I have a few Agrelak Rockmane. So Agrelak is the immovable, is what that means in dwarf. So that's what I have for my dwarf king. Undak Mossbrow would be the resolute Undak. And then Alwyn Bronicle. Bronicle is like the genius, more or less. Yorith Grundaz, it would be the hammer. I think Grundaz is hammer. And this one, just in terms of narrative fluff stuff, this you probably remember because he, in our last campaign, was the engineer who failed to defend his logging camp from your Kroxigor-led warband early in the campaign.
Gorkar.
Yes, and so Yorith took the Slayer Oath for having failed to defend his holding and this place of industry. And so then in all the future games when I took Yorith, he was a Slayer. So that was just a lot of fun to see that progression, that narrative thing just happen for one of my characters. And so I think a book that gives you all of this narrative fluff to run with just lets you have all of the material in your brain to dream up those opportunities to make that happen. And then maybe my favorite name is Troggy Bulgaz, which would be Fat Drinker.
Yep.
And he's my gyrocopter pilot because he's the only one crazy enough.
Right. But yeah, no, I applaud it all the more because of what you just said. And it's like in an army too, where I think a lot of the guys kind of can blend in if you don't add a lot of this flavor in, because it
starts to just feel like, why aren't we just playing with paper tokens or something?
Right. At a certain point, it's like I have an army of a bunch of guys with beards and they have heavy armor. And sure, there's definitely differences there, but it's like it could easily become like a sea of the same. But I think both between the models and the book, and the lore, they've added in a ton of diversity to where, the hammerers do feel different than the longbeards, and or vice versa, at least narratively. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, totally agree. Sorry, I have so much lore stuff here. I feel like it's probably too much, but I'm going to say more because I love it. Keep going. I mentioned the idea that they have these sort of primary sources throughout the book, and that's how it's portrayed. This is interspersed with some more third person, just kind of describing some things with a omniscient kind of perspective. But a lot of the lore comes through in-world sources, and because of that, you get the dwarf perspective on things. And so if you know the greater lore of the Warhammer world, the whole situation, you can see the biases. But the whole situation with the War of Vengeance and the War of the Beard and things is that the Dark Elves actually caused this whole thing to happen. They attacked the dwarves. The dwarves thought that it was the High Elves, and so then they attacked the High Elves. But then because the dwarves can't admit that they're wrong, they were never going to say that it wasn't the High Elves, even if they found out that it was really the Dark Elves. And now that's caused this centuries-long conflict between these two powerful races that could be on the same side and used to be on the same side. But if you just read the lore in the 6th Ed 6.0 book, you would not know that because it only tells you what the dwarfs thought and what the dwarfs think happened, and it never mentions the Dark Elves. Did you look at the High Elf book? I have not. Oh, okay. Because I'm sure that gives you the opposite side. I'd be curious to hear what that one says. I haven't read that lore specifically. But yeah, in the we'll talk about this maybe more in the next episode, but the 6.5 book then does take the fully omniscient perspective with all the lore, and it does tell you that, it actually was a trick. And that's just way less fun, because then it's like, now I just feel like which of course everybody wants to know all the lore, and that's kind of a thing, but there's just something charming about my dwarf book gives me my perspective as the dwarf player, and your dark elf book, high elf book gives you that perspective. Right. It just feels much more rich, I suppose, and like a living world. Yeah, less artificial, less gamey, more lived in, for lack of a better word. I think that's a great way to put it,
There's also a lot of just great images of models. Like I said, I just love these models, but also some cool terrain. Yeah. I really like, there's a couple images of, they have this gate into a dwarf hold, and in front of it are some models of the Lewis chessmen. And that's what they're using as these like dwarf statues.
Oh.
Those two big statues in front of the door there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
yes.
Those are copies of the Lewis chessmen, which are like the oldest chess set ever unearthed in archaeological. Kings? Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's something that it just fits perfectly, but it's just something that was drawn from somewhere else and repurposed here and fits really well, but is really evocative. Looks like carved stone, scales up well with the dwarf models, that sort of a thing. And it just, again, reminds me of, in this era, how much emphasis there was on the DIY side of the hobby for like building out the terrain, building narrative terrain, fluffy terrain for your army to fill your tables and things like that. And these 6-ed books, this one is no exception, just have so many great pictures to give you those ideas. I think there's even a tutorial for building a hill with a rocky outcrop on it or something like that in there. And of course, every dwarf wants a hill in their deployment zone.
As they should. What's cool too, and they lost this, I think, as the book releases went on.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll talk about that in the next episode, but it's like you'll see different armies painted by different people.
Yes.
And they're usually all to a decent standard, of course.
But some that feel a little more attainable than the heavy metal stuff.
But then it also, I think, is really cool because it, as somebody who has a hard time maybe making his own color schemes, it gives me more inspiration to draw from that isn't just the standard top 2 or 3 most popular schemes for a given force.
Yeah, I think in there's like a yellow and black.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. There's like a red and green one almost, which is like
the Christmas dwarf.
Right, you would think, oh, I don't know, I don't want to be the Christmas army, but you know, he kind of pulled it off. Yeah. So what do I know?
Yeah, I think that's a good point about this era of books in general, is just how diverse the hobby sections are.
It's just, it really helps, I think. Again, maybe I'm the person who struggles with this more in this room right now, but it's when I sit down with a book and I want to make an army, I'm like getting into the lore or whatever, and I'm getting excited. I want to make the force that I'm reading about, so I always have a hard time being like, oh, I'm gonna have the offshoot force from down the river and I'll write its own backstory and they'll basically be the same, but it'll be different. And I struggle with that. But this, I don't know, kind of helps me get into that mindset a little more, versus when you look at a later book and you just see the box art for the models that you buy just like in the book again, and it's like, oh well, I could see that on the website, you know, now admittedly in the year 2000 websites weren't nearly as accessible or robust as they are in 2025, but I don't know. I like that here. I like that it's portrayed and given a significant page count. I think that's something that they lost really after 6th Ed, and even in comparing, you know, one of the early releases of 6.0 and then I think the final release, 6.5, is just like almost apples and oranges in terms of hobby section.
Yeah, it has a very different vibe to it, certainly. There's a lot of pictures still of models, but yeah, it's much more cut and dry. It's all the new plastics that have now been painted by the studio teams and things like that. They still have a few models in I think they call it like the showcase section, where there's some cooler ones and older models and things. But anyways, we can talk about 6.5 next time. The last narrative thing I want to touch on, again, just because I like connecting it to the hobby itself, is I noticed just a few cool modeling terrain ideas throughout the book. It mentions some of the dwarf ancestor gods, which again, there's no section that's about, here's how the dwarfs worship, and this is what the whole ancestor god system is like, but you just hear them name dropped a couple of times. So they have the goddess Valaya and the god Grimnir and things like that. And then some sort of oblique references to shrines to these gods. So that could be something that could be motivating, as what would a dwarf shrine look like? I could build that. They talk about Barak Var, I think it is this like half underwater cave system that got turned into a dwarf hold, kind of at the north of the Badlands, and they have steamships and these like fortresses along the coast and things like that. So you could build a dwarf steamship, could be cool. Actually, in the General's Compendium, they have an example of a dwarf steamship because they have all the naval rules in General's Compendium.
Was there ever a Warhammer Fantasy naval game?
Dreadfleet.
Not that one though.
then I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
But there is full naval combat rules in the General's Compendium.
Well, there you go. Maybe yes, there is, Grant.
Actually, I think
it's
there
all
was
6 that did.
Man of War, I think.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Dreadfleet, you'd have like 1 or 2 boats.
I honestly don't know almost anything about that. I just know it existed, saw pictures, but I think that came out in like 7th edition era. Or
yeah, that
8th
came out
era.
much later.
Yeah. There's some mention at some point about Norse dwarfs. Yep. And so this more like Viking vibe from the north area that have more in common with the barbarian tribes up there and things like that. They mention a Slayer variant that they call Berserkers, but instead of having red hair, they're completely shaved. So you could do some cool alternative Slayers, which could just run as Slayers, or maybe it's just a way to make up some cool house rule to make them slightly different or something like that.
Chaos touched.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know, something.
Yeah. And that, again, a cool modeling opportunity because they're so far north. Is there a little bit of like chaos influence happening, even though they're not full chaos dwarfs yet? But
right.
Is there a little bit of taint? Maybe you could use the Dogs of War option as your rare slot to bring some Chaos Marauders.
There you go.
But they're not like full chaosy. They're just more like the Norse Marauder dudes.
Yeah.
Sort of a thing. So yeah, you could make a whole really fluffy, cool army of dwarfs that are more themed around the Norse dwarf Viking style thing. And then you could also do, rather than a classic dwarf army, more this idea of like a dispossessed dwarf army, which I know is co-opted in Age of Sigmar, so I'm not referring to that, but this idea that some dwarfs are exiled from the mountain holds because they're doing something a little too out there in terms of engineering or runesmithing or something. Or it could just be that their hold was destroyed and now they're living among the other races. And that's another opportunity to bring in some of the Dogs of War units to have a mixed army. You can also kind of go the other way because there are dwarfs in the Dogs of War list. So you can take mostly something else army with a dwarf unit or two. And so, yeah, there's a lot of cool ways that you could play with that. And again, give some really interesting and deep lore to your own force to make it unique.
Yeah. 100% mirror everything.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think that covers the lore stuff. And again, sorry that was a little lengthy, but this is what I get excited about with the dwarfs in particular.
Bangering.
So let's roll into the army-wide stuff as I have it in my notes. But there's some army-wide special rules, but I also have a couple other things that are more just general notes about the army, not tied to specific units necessarily. But I have first here dwarf handguns. You want to tell us about dwarf handguns?
Yeah, dwarf handguns are pretty neat. They're basically an Empire handgun, but a couple rules are either missing or, well, honestly, missing is probably the right thing to say.
One missing and one gained, actually.
Is it? Man, no, I can't find it. Of course, I'm pretty sure the big thing is it's 24-inch range, strength 4, armor piercing, but notably it doesn't have move or fire.
Which means you can move and fire.
And shoot.
Yes.
Whereas, say, Empire handgunners, you cannot. So this, at least in this version of the book, allows you to move your dwarves as little as they can and continue to shoot, which is very nice. You can turn around and shoot. You can pivot to the side and shoot.
Which is super helpful in an otherwise very static army to have that little bit of extra mobility that you wouldn't otherwise have. The other thing that they gain is +1 to hit at half range.
At short range.
And so that's their like dwarf craftsmanship or something like that is what it's called. So that'd be up to 12 inches. You get +1 to hit. So that plus being able to move and shoot means dealing with skirmishers is much easier.
Yeah.
Something like Empire handgunners, they're just going to spin in circles as the skirmishers keep running behind them out of their line of sight. But dwarf handgunners, they can just turn to face them and shoot them and
with
not even be
+1.
Right, to counteract the -1 from the move and shoot. So definitely that's super great. Really, really nice option for ranged weaponry in this army.
I was going to say the only negative is they don't get that first shot D6 extra, but the fact that they can move and shoot
they basically get an extra default 3 inches.
Right. Basically gets rid of that for the most part. So they're pretty much superior to the Empire, as they should be. These are dwarven made.
Right.
So.
And the dwarves taught the humans how to make black powder weapons, etc. So you would expect that. Next up is Gromril armor, which is unique to the dwarfs, but it's essentially the same as full plate or chaos armor or something, but it's the dwarf version of a 4-up armor save. So that's super cool. In this army, it's relegated to just characters, except for the Ironbreakers are the notable exception, but we'll get into that when we get there. I think it's also worth noting that all the units are infantry in this army, except for the gyrocopter, which is a flyer. but everything else is just infantry, which is pretty peculiar. Most armies have a pretty big variety of cavalry and, light troops and heavy troops and
monstrous infantry, monsters,
skirmishers, all of those. So this also list has no skirmishers, so it's all rank and file units aside from like war machines, etc.
Yeah, you're pushing blocks.
And everything is move 3, again, except for the gyrocopter, of course, flying. That's tough. I think that's one of the biggest things up against this army. You're almost never going to get a charge off because you're just going to get outpaced. There's this game that happens in fantasy, which if you've played it at all, but where you're sort of jockeying for like who's going to be within 8 inches first and make the charge and not fail it because they were 9 inches and then get charged kind of thing. The dwarfs will always lose that game. So unless your opponent is just really bad at judging those distances and just trying to make charges from like 10 inches away or something. But
this is one of the definitive things about it. It's not really a special rule, but no other army has movement 3 really at all that I can think of, and these guys just have it everywhere. So it's very limiting. It prevents you from being as aggressive as I think some players would love to be, because you never get to pick your fights. Is really what it is, at least in most scenarios, assuming, you're separated by like 24 inches or 18 inches of no man's land at the start. It's going to take you so long to get up there, and you're going to have minimum 2 inches less charge range, which doesn't sound like a lot, but
it makes all the difference again in that sort of mini game of judging who's going to be within charge range first. So it's very hard to get those charges off with the dwarfs, which again can be really tough. This is offset by the fact that they're toughness 4 or better across the board and leadership 9 or better across the board.
Which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and so that allows you to, in many cases, take a charge, tank it, and then stick around for the combat next turn. There's also a lot of low initiative, so you're often not attacking first in successive rounds anyways. But again, the high toughness, high amount of armor, high leadership helps offset that quite a bit. But I do like that they leaned into the dwarfs have short legs. They would be slower, but they're stoic, determined, and all of that we see represented in the rules, which, as we've talked about before, we like to see. And I think they did a good job of that here. Hit us with the just general, what they call the army-wide special rules.
Yeah, so kind of paired with the movement is relentless, which is the idea that they can always march no matter what. They can never be march blocked. That helps a lot, because if they were march blocked, moving 3 inches would be just absolutely terrible. So you can always count on them to be able to move 6, which is at least something.
It's something. Helps you maneuver when things get in tight and close. Yeah.
So you're never going to be completely have your back broken by a flyer flying behind you. You can always just spin or just move forward your full amount. It doesn't. That's a big thing for this. I think if they didn't have relentless, you would have to be just playing gun lines and doing weird stuff where you're deploying units to the sides of other units preemptively to try and counter. It would be very difficult, I feel. I won't go further into that unless you have thoughts.
Nope.
Okay, and then along with that, they have resolute, which I always thought was interesting because this comes across as a negative to me. But they portray it as if it's a positive, at least in the rules writing and the name. Because when you think resolute, it's oh wow, they're just not going to move
fast. Yeah.
But they have -1 to their flee and pursue rolls. So what that means is they get caught more often and they don't catch as often.
Yeah.
Which are, I'm trying to think, maybe there's a time when you don't want to, if there's a spot on the board in your scenario you're trying to hold, maybe that's theoretically good, but they might chase you down anyway and then you die. So I'd say that's generally a negative, which is interesting and on theme though.
Yeah, and again, they, like you said, describe it narratively as a good thing. There's even something later on in the lore section in the back of the book where it's this whole thing of somebody explaining to a young dwarf prince how to lead a military army force, etc. And he says, you don't want to get caught out. If people are running, don't run after them, because then you're going to get caught out in the middle of the battlefield and get surrounded. And we can't have that. There's not enough dwarfs for us to be running recklessly ahead like that. And so it does feel, again, very dwarfy. But yeah, it definitely hurts, especially against things rolling 3d6 to pursue you. It's very hard to get away from those. But man, when you do, it feels so good. And when you run down an enemy unit with your dwarfs at -1, it feels so good. But it is rare.
Indeed. And then finally they have Ancestral Grudge, which is basically just their random I hate greenskins rule. They just all have hatred against all greenskins, orcs, goblins of all varieties, doesn't matter, snotlings, black orcs, etc. They have hatred. This is just lore reasons because they've been fighting them, and as you mentioned, like goblins are infesting many of the old holds, etc., etc.
And that's what reroll
all hits in the first round of combat, all missed hits.
Yeah.
So that could be a big deal,
Yeah,
especially for an army with, generally speaking, elite weapon skills. They're going to be hitting most greenskins on 3s for many of their units, and at worst 4s, never worse than that. So, seems like a very good, powerful rule. And they get it for free, so I guess sad times for the greenskins player in our upcoming game. But
which,
we'll
as
figure
we've
that
talked
out.
about, that's always a kind of a weird bummer with these things, is it feels so evocative, but it almost feels like it should be kept for special scenarios rather than all the time, because it is just going to be way harder for the greenskins player to fight dwarfs than anyone else.
If greenskins got another random rule a little more than like night goblins having hatred to compensate, I would feel less bad. I don't know. I like how they do it with dark elves and high elves, not to get off topic, but they have like one gets immune to panic against when they're fighting them, and then the other one just has hatred or whatever. I forget what it is. So it's like, oh, they both get a bonus.
Yeah, that feels a little balanced, and it's army-wide.
Sure. So it's just, I wish they had done it a little bit that way. This feels like, hey, dwarves are just better. Yeah. Cool. It's not a huge deal, though.
Yeah. Probably won't completely swing any games.
Indeed.
Another kind of just general thing for the army is that, like we said earlier, they're very anti-magic, and the dwarfs actually get 4 dispel dice as their base. Interestingly enough, that is not in the army book. That is only in the main rule book under the dispel section. And so I think that that's kind of a weird thing to have left out here. I think it would have been helpful to add in when it's talking about runesmiths or when it's talking about like the army composition and things like that, just as a reminder, because I think especially for a newer player, that would be really easy to miss, and is kind of a big deal for dwarfs since they're not going to often have as many dispel dice to stand up against magic heavy enemy force. So just worth pointing out there, you do get the additional 2 dispel dice for a total of 4 just as your baseline when you play dwarfs. Yeah,
and that really allows them early on in smaller point games. They can just ride that, I think, for at least a while. Maybe once you're starting hitting 1,500 points, you really want to start thinking about a rune priest or something to get more. But that at least gets you some protection at a small game where you just literally can't take a wizard.
Right.
And you can get away with that because this is pretty good, honestly.
Yeah, you'll almost be able to guarantee getting rid of 1 spell and maybe 2 with this many dispel dice usually. So, all right. Anything else to add army-wide, or do you want to roll into units?
I think we can roll into units.
All right, we'll try to move through here at a decent clip just so we don't take all night trying to get through the list. But up first is the Dwarf Lord, and this dude is an absolute unit of a melee character. He's weapon skill 7, toughness 5. I wrote down his strength wrong. You've got the book open. What's his strength?
4.
4, excellent, yeah. He's pretty powerful. He's got leadership 10, which really helps hold the line. It's one of the few characters that has leadership 10, I think, in the game.
Yeah, it's him, them, dark elf lord, and a high elf lord, and maybe, don't quote me, wood elf players. Maybe wood elves have access to a leadership 10 guy, but it's basically if you're not a dwarf or an elf, you pretty much can't, I don't think so.
Yeah, so really nice there. And again, when you're always getting charged, it's nice to have that for your 12-inch leadership bubble for break tests to be a little less likely to run away when you're getting hit with massive hammer attacks on those first turns of charging. But I think the hard thing here is just it's hard to make sure that he actually gets into a useful combat. Because you're so slow, it's really easy for your opponent to just play avoidance and just never put a unit that you want to fight up against him. And so I think that makes it hard to justify his points sometimes if you can't really guarantee that he's going to get in there. What do you think about that aspect of it?
I agree. I think he's almost nerfed by the fact, and I don't want to jump into the Rune Lord too quick, but the Rune Lord has leadership 10 also. And for a lot of other books, I know Rune Lord's not a wizard, but the wizard magic-y equivalent guy usually has worse leadership to make up for the fact that they've got that stuff going on.
Right.
Whereas they don't have this. So unless you're taking the Lord for his admittedly significantly better combat prowess, And it's not like he can ride anything. He has no mount options.
No.
So you can't more easily commit him. And as we've already told you, you're never going to pick your fights. So I can definitely see that. And he's so cool too. Access to really good armor saves easily. He's got 125 points of magic item allowance, which is kind of unique for dwarves. Most armies at Lords, you only get 100. So you could really
tool him up.
a Lord if you wanted to, like crazy. Probably not the best idea at a normal 2,000 point game, but you could go ham and it would be terrifying, I'm sure. But yeah, I agree. He's really cool. And I think for most games, he's fine. I don't think he's like aggressively bad or anything. He's pretty darn scary in melee. And if you do get him placed centrally where...
Yeah, it'd be hard to completely ignore
him.
He'll fight something probably.
He's going to probably get into combat at least for a couple of rounds. He's probably going to influence those combats at the very least. Definitely. And maybe encourage a win or hold up some with that leadership 10. He's notably got initiative 4 too.
Yeah.
Which is pretty darn good for
but if you
dwarves.
boost that with a rune, then now you're striking before a lot of other opponents.
So there's some options there you can go. Strength 4 is kind of a letdown, but it's very cheap just to give him a great weapon.
Yep.
And then you can always just throw Gromril on there with some runes of stone and get him a really good armor save for pretty darn cheap.
Yeah, you can get him to a 1-up if you do shield, Gromril, hand weapon, and the Rune of Stone.
What if you could you put multiple stones?
That's one exception to that rule of rune making, is that the Rune of Stone can only ever be one. Can't stack the Rune of Stone. I couldn't
remember.
Which is unfortunate, but that would, 5 points to get +1 would be a little abusive.
It would be a little too good. But what I wonder is like, do you just take him with a great weapon for 6 points, give him Gromril, and then give him a Rune of Stone on that, and just live with a 3-up because he's tough 5 with 3 wounds.
Yeah, he'll still survive a lot.
Probably fine, unless, again, caveat, you're going to be dueling. Unless you expect to be dueling, I feel like he's just fine with that, and he's going to mulch most guys. Admittedly, he'll strike last, but he's weapon skill 7, so unless something really crazy is fighting him, he's only getting hit on 4s anyway. So he's just naturally defensive and tanky. I give him a solid thumbs up, but not 2. I think he's fine.
Yeah, he's not the obvious choice by any means, but I don't think you'd necessarily be hamstringing yourself if you chose to take him. I think this is true for all dwarf characters in this version of the book. They're very customizable. They only come with a hand weapon, and then you could do light armor, you could do heavy armor, you can do Gromril, you can do a shield, you can do a handgun, you can do a pistol. So there's just so many options you can take to kit him out kind of however you want. So if you really were thinking, well, he's never going to get into combat, give him a handgun, and then he can just stand in the line and shoot people with his ballistic skill 4.
I do wish he was BS5.
That would be nice.
The captain, Empire Captain, sorry, I'm not, shout out Empire Captain, BS5.
Better than the dwarf.
Better than dwarf, and he's like almost a third the cost. Just saying. I know a dwarf handgun's better than an Empire one, but still.
Yeah, but still, for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of runes that I think if you wanted to kit them out are really useful. The Master Rune of Swiftness is only 25 points and it gives you strike first. And so I think that can be a nice surprise, especially if you're going to get into a challenge where they charged you and they're expecting to just destroy your unit on that first charge. But then you're like, no, wait, I have always strikes first with the Master Rune of Swiftness. And so that can be a nice surprise. The cheaper option for this is you can get the Rune of Speed for only 5 points, which is +1 initiative. And so that puts him up to initiative 5, like we were just saying, and he's not going to strike first when he gets charged, but then against most people in the remainder of the rounds, he'll be striking before normal troops and things like that. You can combo in a Rune of Cleaving too for 20 points to get +1 strength, and so you can even put 2 of those on if you want with his big magic item allotment. So you could do always strikes first, fun. Great weapon essentially, but also still with a shield if you wanted to, which you wouldn't be getting the parry save, but at least the extra +1.
Right.
Now, granted, we're up to, 65 points for that, but super cool. Another one that I've never tried, but seems kind of fun is the Master Rune of Flight. It's a 50-point rune, and it makes him have essentially Thor's hammer. He can throw his hammer 12 inches out of his unit and then strike anyone that he wants. So you can snipe a character with this 12 inches away. And what that does is you just get an automatic hit as if it were close combat. So if you've also tooled it up for like +1 strength or whatever kind of things, now all of a sudden you can be like taking a couple wounds off some guys or killing a champion or something like that.
Snipe some champs. Yeah. I like that.
Or a wizard or something could be cool. Rune of Resistance is also super nice on a character that's already going to have a great armor save because it's reroll failed armor saves. And so being able to reroll an already great save is just a good bang for your buck on that for 25 points. If you're really worried about him dying, you could get the Rune of Iron for a 6-up ward save or 2 of those for a 5-up ward save, which again is just something I love about this system is you can fully customize your items and take multiples of most runes and things like that.
Build your own talisman of protection.
Yeah, which is so fun. And then there's the Master Rune of Spite for 45, which just goes straight to a 4-up save. I don't know, maybe we should just mention briefly, there's this whole system of like how you build these runes and things like you can only ever have one of each master rune. You can't have the same exact combination of runes on the same item. And you can't, I'm totally blanking on.
There's the rule of 3.
You can't have more than 3. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. So those are the main ones that you just have to keep in mind as you're combining them. But within those, there's still tons of cool combinations that you can do.
Oh, yeah.
And then this is one that is cool, but maybe way too expensive to be worth it. But the Master Rune of Kingship, you can put on his crown. I think it's a Rune of Armor, or it might be a talisman. I can't remember now.
It's a talisman.
Talisman, excellent. So
that
essentially,
terrifying.
So it makes the unit that he's in stubborn and immune to fear and terror, which is really cool. It's kind of weird that this doubles up on what hammerers already are, which they're stubborn if the general is with them.
That's true.
And so then you're kind of losing out on part of this because usually you would want your hammerers with your general because otherwise they don't get that rule. So it's kind of weird that they doubled up on that. I kind of wish it was just something else, like immune to panic or just whatever, like any other thing that would be useful so that you could still do it with the hammerers.
In a 3,000 point game, you put this on your non-general lord, and then you put him with some longbeards who are now leadership 10, stubborn and immune to fear and terror, which sounds pretty good actually because they're not a high unit model count or high unit strength, so fear is something to be wary of.
Absolutely. Well, no, we kind of already talked about that. Let's move on to the Rune Lord.
Okay.
Rune Lords give you an extra Dispel die. So again, that's going to bump you up to 5 if you just have the one Rune Lord.
Do they only give you 1 or
in this version,
you
you only get 1.
Okay.
6.5 did change that, but in
My
the 6.0
bad for
book,
mixing it up. Sorry.
you only get the 1. Whether you take a Rune Smith or a Rune Lord, you get 1 per guy that you take. He's again super customizable like the rest of these characters. You can take kind of whatever version of him you want.
150 point limit.
Yeah, so you can have even more runic items, which makes sense since, he's the guy making the runes.
He's making them.
He's honestly pretty tanky himself.
Yes.
So although he's definitely not a dwarf lord, he could still hold his own against most hero level characters, I think. And he just a few runes that I think would be interesting for him. Rune of Spellbinding gives you +1 to all dispel attempts for 50 points. So super good if you're going up against like a Slann Mage Priest list or something like that, or High Elves.
Sure.
Master Rune of Balance, again, 50 points, but you get to steal a power die from the enemy and put it in your dispel pool every turn. Super helpful because it's making you stronger and them weaker at the same time. And then it's just worth noting that they have the Rune of Spellbreaking, which is 25 points and is essentially a dispel scroll. Yeah. So those could also be handy to have on hand if you're into dispel scrolls. But I think the other thing worth mentioning here is that this is the only way to get the Anvil of Doom, which is the way that dwarfs access magic casting. It's 200 points, which is a lot of points to spend at 2K. I've never actually taken one. But I think you could make an argument for it. The powers that it brings are pretty cool, but I think let's just run through quickly how that works because it is, again, a very unique thing.
This is a weird one.
Yeah, so this is, like I said, the only way that dwarfs can cast spells. It's an immobile object, so it's literally an anvil with like a little smithing furnace, and then you put your Rune Lord on it, and he's got two anvil guards, and they're just going to stay there the whole game. The nice thing is most of the spells that it has don't require line of sight or have range, or maybe it's only half of them, but we'll get into that. During the magic phase, if you have an Anvil of Power, you then get d6 plus 2 magic dice for your power pool, and then your Rune Lord can use those to cast any of the spells that the Anvil provides up to once per turn, and you can only throw a maximum of 4 dice at each spell.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah, he's basically a level 4 wizard.
Level 3 wizard, but yes.
Sorry, level 3 wizard with 4 spells to choose from.
Yeah.
So pretty solid. You're not rolling to find out like, oh, which spell do I end up with kind of a thing. But yeah, so I like this. It's very fluffy and evocative just right from the get-go. Each of the runes that he can smash on the anvil to create an effect is named after one of the elements. You've got your rune of water, rune of air, rune of fire, rune of earth. Water can target anyone anywhere. It casts on a 6+, and it makes them half movement. Super great for dwarves.
Amazing.
Because that could like stop a heavy cavalry charge in its tracks. That could just disorder the enemy's battle line when all of a sudden one of their core anvil units or a hammer that's coming around the flank is now no longer keeping up with everybody else. So really powerful.
And only a 6+.
Yeah.
I feel like this is so powerful early on that this might be the one you save even. If you get a good roll on your power dice pool, I could see going with some of these other ones first, just trying to bait dispel dice for nukes and then being like, hey, your knights are not going to really move this turn or something. Just buying another turn of shooting.
Absolutely, because that's, again,
really
that's going to help you out. The Rune of Air casts on a 7+, and it gives you D6 strength 4 hits, but this is lightning coming from the sky, so no line of sight required and no range, so you can do it anywhere against any unit. Pretty solid to have a magic missile, essentially, but without those limitations.
It's basically chain lightning from non-edited heavens.
Yeah.
So...
And then you've got Rune of Fire, which is your upgraded magic missile, 2d6 strength 4 hits, which again we see in a lot of the other lores.
Yep.
This casts on an 8+, but it does have a 30-inch range, and it specifically says it's a magic missile. So do you think that means it also needs line of sight?
I would assume it does.
That's my guess as well.
30-inch range is pretty long, too. So if you put him centrally, which I imagine you will,
that's still most...
You're going to cover the vast majority of the table. Where it really comes into maybe this being an issue is if there's a lot of line of sight blocking terrain, forests, maybe somebody can hide from you. But that's when the Rune of Air comes in, and somebody's got to come out eventually because the dwarf player, generally speaking, is going to be the defensive one.
Yeah, just
so they got to come out and
to
come to you eventually, and when they do, you throw Rune of Fire at them.
Yeah, and then you'll burn them up.
Yep.
And then finally we have the Rune of Earth, which is cast on a 9+. You do have to have line of sight, but no range limitation. And it's D6 strength 5 hits, which is pretty great. But if the target is in rocky terrain, then it's another D6 strength 5 hits. So 2d6 total. This one's not bad, but the fact that like the really good version of it is predicated on people being in rocky terrain that's heavily dependent upon the battlefield you're playing on, which could just have none or one piece that's in a weird spot that no one's ever going to go near or anything like that.
This is like a lore of life spell, is it not? That's something similar where it's if they're in a mountain or on a hill, it's like 2d6. It's very much inspired by that.
It feels like a corner case kind of thing. So
could be good early on if somebody deploys on a hill. Not really knowing this might be a little bit of a gotcha, I admit, which aren't always the best, but hey.
But also if people, I mean, even if they do know, they might still put ranged units on a hill to get the 2 ranks shooting or war machines for line of sight and stuff. So.
And then the rocks hit them in the face and their unit flees off the table turn 1.
Yeah.
And then
we'll love it.
Them's the breaks.
And then finally, the other kind of crazy thing about this is there's no miscast table.
Yep.
So if you miscast, the phase just ends, which is kind of like one of the better results you can get on the miscast table, but there's no chance of getting hurt or anything by failing this. But all of these can be dispelled like normal, so your enemy will be using their dispel dice just like they would if you were casting with a wizard and that sort of a thing. Anything else to add on the Anvil of Doom?
Just that I think if it dies, there's like a negative bonus 100 points that goes to the opponent. I don't know how often that's going to happen. Again, we haven't played with this out of the games you've played thus far, and I'd be curious to see if that ends up being something that this gets targeted and soloed out. What base size is this bad boy typically on? He's sometimes shown in the back on like a circle, isn't he?
Yeah, so the actual model from this era came with like a plinth that the anvil is on that is circular, and so I think you can just deploy it on that, and I would guess that's something like 60 to 80 millimeters.
Something like that. Yeah, just kind of looking at it. That sounds about right. So it's not exactly super small, but it's not super huge either to where you could probably protect it. Honestly, on a hill would be awesome.
Right. But of course,
we're going to say that a lot.
How often is that going to happen? Yeah.
For a lot of these units. I think it's really potent. It gives the dwarves an ability to engage in a phase where they normally don't get to. I think it's frankly fantastic. A lot of people will poo-poo on this one, this version of the anvil, or call it, maybe they won't poo-poo on it, but they'll say it's more fair. Haha. I think it's really powerful, allows them to engage, gives you more access to reach out and touch someone that isn't just artillery and shooting.
Yeah.
And then makes the opponent too, who, if you're doing closed lists, thinks, I don't need to bring any magic defense. I'm playing dwarves.
And then all of a sudden
Boom.
you plop down an
you
anvil.
need magic defense all of a sudden, because now it's very random. You could roll a 1 and get 3 power dice, and then you 3 dice Rune of Fire, and they dispel you.
Yeah.
So that could happen for sure. And then you're like, man, I spent 200 points. But it could also, you roll a 6 and you got 8 dice and you get to cast 3 of these or whatever. And, so a little random, probably hard to deal with. And I don't know how it would actually play out, but it's still leadership 10. And if it's at 2K, your general's on it. I could see this being the centerpiece, for lack of a better word, of a really defensive force.
Right, because you don't want to move away from it if your general's on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could see it being like, okay, you've got some big blocks on either side. Hopefully you're on a hill, maybe one in front or whatever, to kind of redirect and hold the line. Meanwhile, your artillery's on the hill with you or whatever, or on either side, and maybe some shooting infantry as well. And you're just blasting people. And that will probably work in a lot of scenarios, I would feel. It might struggle a little bit more where you have to run out there, but there are some units that allow you to kind of get to farther off spots, more from the start of the game, for the lack of a better word, or later on into the game, but those have limited effect. But I think this is really potent for most games where you're just kind of lining up and shooting at each other. I think this is really powerful.
Yeah, and it's just super cool, super fluffy. Love that it's totally unique to the dwarves and that it gives them magic, but in a very dwarfy way that feels like it fits. All right, next up we have the Demon Slayer. Yeah, tell me about this.
So this guy, he is a slayer, which means he's got slayer weapons, I believe, which basically means...
He doesn't have slayer weapons.
That's in the next one.
He only comes with a hand weapon. You, in fact, have to upgrade him to get an extra hand weapon or a great weapon.
Nightmare. Okay, well, doesn't the slayer
He does have the slayer rule.
Okay.
That does not mean that in this edition. So in this version of it, the slayer rule means that they always count as having a strength equal to their enemy's toughness.
Yes, so he can never wound on less than a 4.
Correct.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I was going to kind of get at. My bad. I probably used the wrong verbiage. So he could be fighting a demon who's like toughness 5 or whatever, and despite that, him only having strength 4, he's going to wound it on a 4. He won't wound it on a 5. If he's fighting a stegodon who's toughness 6, he's going to wound it on a 4. Doesn't matter. So you can kind of get away without needing to necessarily go with a great weapon or other types of strength increasing runes. Although you'll probably want to do that anyway, I would imagine, just for the armor decreases against most rank and flank stuff that you're probably going to be engaging the majority of the time.
And I think that's one of the biggest downsides for these Slayer characters is, again, it's really hard to get them to attack the things that they're best at fighting because your opponent can just avoid the unit.
Movement 3.
Yeah. And so this is a situation that I think is even specifically harder for the dwarves to get the matchup that they want because they're usually trying to target a specific enemy unit. And so, they can just play avoidance, run interference a lot easier, and avoid you. So I think for me, these guys are a tough sell.
Yeah, I wouldn't take it until 3,000 points. And even then,
just for funsies,
I would probably take a Lord and a Rune Lord first. But yeah, for funsies, I could see him being a fun secondary lord where you just kit him out and you got a ton of points to play with. And you're like, I'm just going to spend 100 points of magic items on my Demon Slayer and he's going to be crazy.
Yeah, which awesome. I think one that definitely you'd want to think about is Master Rune of Spite for that 4-up ward save for 45 points just because they have no armor.
Yeah.
And so despite the high toughness, no armor is really bad. Never rolling a save, you die really easy.
He is weapon skill 7. Which is pretty elite. So that's vampire count level. That's your black or 4 boss. 4 attacks, and he's pretty darn killy. Again, it always comes back down to he's movement 3, and is he going to get to fight? Is he going to get shot to death? Him and his boys. But yeah, I think out of the 3 lords choices, he's the least exciting.
Agreed. And it's also just kind of weird. Normal slayers in the unit like the special unit type, they count as just having 2 hand weapons by default. So I don't know why that's not true of the Demon Slayer or the Dragon Slayer by default. You have to pay for that extra one. It's just kind of weird that they're not the same. Yeah.
They wanted you to be able to customize.
I guess.
I don't know. I think they could have given it to them for free and they would both be fine.
Yep.
What about the heroes?
Yeah, so Thane, I mean, these are all really easy, except for the Engineer. They're all just the downgraded version of the Lord choices, so there's not a lot of different stuff to say here. The Thane has all the same strengths and weaknesses that the Lord has, but he's just a little lesser. So really tanky, but really slow.
My big takeaway here, though, is he's tough 4.
Yeah, which makes a BSB very resilient, because we've talked about this before, but BSBs have a hard time staying alive since they can't take all the extra equipment, but tough 4 helps with that.
I do wish, though, that just compared to the Lord, who's tough 5, you feel that now he has a different role. The Thane isn't planning to probably kill and level people down to the ground in melee. He's more average than that, aside from his weapon skill of 6, which is slightly above average for heroes. But other than that, he's kind of, I don't want to say he's an Empire captain, but he gives me Empire captain vibes.
Very much. He fills a similar role. He has a lot of the same options where you can kit him out with light armor, heavy armor, Gromril, ranged weapons, close combat weapons. So very customizable. And again, he's just slightly better than the Empire captain in several ways.
Right.
I think it's worth just throwing out a few of the banner runes at this point, because they often would go on your BSB. This one is one I have not tried, but I think would be really powerful at higher point levels. But the Master Rune of Stromny Redbeard, +1 combat res to all units within 12 inches.
Ooh.
So it's like getting a bunch of runes of battle.
Yeah, that's how much is that?
100.
Okay.
So it's
that's
like
a lot.
4 runes of battle.
Yep.
So you need at least 4 units to be within that 12 inches, including yourself, to make it feel
Sometimes
worth it.
It's the psychological impact that
That's
you
also
can't
true.
measure. But yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this could be really great for, I mean, you, like we've been saying, are typically in a defensive static deployment formation. And so you're going to be able to get the most out of this that way. There's also, for 60 points, the Master Rune of Groth One Eye, which makes the unit stubborn. So that could be really helpful, again, for just weathering a withering charge that might otherwise make them break and run. The Rune of Kadrin gets you re-rolling hits of 1. That's 50 points. But again, as we've said with Hatred, like that can be big, especially if you're already hitting on 3s.
Yeah.
50 points for the Rune of Slowness. This is another thing that just helps offset a dwarf weakness, which means that units charging them are minus D6 inch charge range.
Ooh.
So that could be the difference between successfully charging you and failing the charge, which means you get the charge next turn. And so I think, that could be really good. And then Rune of Courage is 50 points as well. And that makes you immune to psychology, which again, like you were pointing out earlier, being immune to fear. Yeah, especially going up against something like vampire counts that could have very large unit sizes of fear-causing enemies. So yeah, those would be my picks for banners.
Yeah, I guess my final thought for Thane and kind of the heroes in general too is them being leadership 9 means that because your mainstay units are all leadership 9, you don't really have to play the game that everybody else is playing, where you've got this central guy. You can get at less than 2K anyway.
Yeah.
There's literally no punishment. You can just do whatever. There's no negative really.
But unfortunately, there's no Griffin to put him on to fly all over and do stuff.
There's nothing to really. But you don't have to have that thought process in your mind. You could play him way on the extreme flank or whatever, which is kind of nice, honestly, because sometimes those are the most vulnerable parts of your line potentially.
Right, because they might be bringing in a heavy unit to try to outflank you.
So having a hero in there who might be your general in a smaller game, really amps up the killing power and thus the staying power of that unit, and can make the difference in a combat resolution. So I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, other than that, he's kind of average to me. I think he's just fine. He's very cheap, 55 points. I can't complain.
Absolutely.
What do you think of the Runesmith? He's 70 points.
It's identical to the Rune Lord, just cheaper. He still only gives you +1 to spell die.
So objectively better from a magic defense.
Exactly. Yeah.
standpoint.
So I think it almost feels like, why would you take the Rune Lord unless you are taking the Anvil of Doom? Because he doesn't really bring much else to the table.
The Rune Lord, we didn't touch on this, but he's only got 2 attacks.
Yeah.
So he's not killing a lot. And hey, how many attacks does a runesmith have? 2.
Yeah.
So what's the difference offensively? Weapon skill 6 versus 5. So in the grand scheme, they're going to be identical.
Against a lot of opponents. Yeah.
So
it feels a little bit like sort of the same situation with the greenskins, where it's like, why not just take the goblin shaman instead of these great shamans?
Right.
I don't know.
I hear you. The maybe argument you could make is the runesmith has a 75 point magic item limit.
True.
Which
so
is
if you
still
were really
good.
going to kid him out.
Right. Whereas the rune lord has 150. So if you wanted to just go rune crazy, you could go crazy there. I don't know. The Thane, he only had 50. I don't think I said that, which is the only real normal character thus far that's had a normal. Yeah. I guess the Demon Slayer too. But I think the runesmiths is really good. I would say I would have a hard time if I was building a list not bringing at least one.
Absolutely. I think they're helpful to have for that extra dispel die, unless you know your opponent for whatever reason isn't bringing any magic. And then the fact that, again, all these heroes are so customizable. If you're not planning on getting him stuck in, he's just maybe going to be with a unit of range troops or something, then yeah, give him just light armor or something like that. And then he'll be okay, and you save a few points you can spend elsewhere.
Keep him cheap. Yeah. What do you think of the engineer?
The engineer, I think, suffers from some of the same problems that the Empire engineer does, where it's just a cost. The
benefited cost benefit. I know what you're trying to say.
Yes, what is that term?
I'm trying to think where basically other options,
opportunity
cost are better. So by taking this, it's not that he's so intrinsically bad. It's just that the other options are better or whatever. So,
but even at 2K, maybe, because like we've said, you know, if you're going to take the runesmith and the anvil, you got your extra dispel die. Oh, we didn't point this out. The anvil also gives you an extra dispel die.
Oh, okay. Well, that helps.
Yeah. So then maybe you use up one of your hero slots for the engineer then, and you still have a hero slot to take a Thane for the BSB and, you know, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think that even at 2K, I would consider taking him if I'm going to have a bunch of war machines. So I guess we can point out what his purpose is. Like the Empire Engineer, he just helps bolster your war machines. The bolt thrower, this is worth pointing out. There originally, he could just let the bolt thrower re-roll to hit whenever it failed to hit, but they eroded that.
They use his BS.
Now they just use his ballistic skill. So he hits on a 3+ if he's the one firing the bolt thrower. Still good. But it's just worth pointing that out, because if you are just shopping around on like thrift books or whatever and you get the first printing of the 6.0 book, it may still have that old rule. So I think this is just a good reminder to always look up the FAQs and erratas.
Right.
And just make sure that
you have... I think the Facebook page has all those for those who know what that is.
And then what's that website? It's like WHFB.6th.app or something.
Yeah, there's a great... They do it for a lot of different editions for fantasy, but they've got a really good rules compendium that's searchable online.
And that has all the FAQ and errata in there as well. So definitely check that out, just to make sure that you're not missing minor changes like this that are meaningful. Then the other thing the engineer can do is he can give you 2 guesses with the cannon or the stone thrower. And so these are both guess range, where you say, I think it's going to go 27 inches, and then you measure it out. But you get to say 27 and 33, and then you get to measure both out and pick whichever one you want. So it just makes those a little more reliable, especially if you're not as good at guessing those ranges and eyeballing it. But honestly, that doesn't feel as good as being able to like re-roll a misfire, which you have to buy a rune to do and things like that. So.
I have mixed thoughts on this guy. For 65 points, I think he's very expensive. I do like his artillery master rule being a little more unique than just reroll a...
Yeah, it is cool.
Misfire, which is what the Empire guy basically does, right? Does he give any benefit? I don't remember beyond just, hey, it's less likely to blow up. The Empire
he can also take the Hochland long rifle.
Okay, so he can do some of that
rifle,
stuff. Which I think I critiqued that guy, saying he doesn't even come with a gun. Neither does this guy. Why can't we give the engineers guns to start with? Let them shoot people.
Yeah.
That's just me being annoyed. But for me, I have a hard time getting super excited about him. I think for me, it would be cute on a bolt thrower. If I know I have an opponent coming up that like that's going to be really good against, if there's going to be a lot of heavy cavalry or a lot of heavy armor.
Yeah, hitting on a 3 is quite good.
Hitting on a 3 at 24 inches is pretty good, and you're going to be strength 6. You might knock out a couple of knights.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It's a big deal.
But 65 points again. Ugh, I don't know.
Yeah, and a whole character slot. Yeah, it's tough.
So,
but I don't think you're not going to hamstring yourself by
Yeah.
taking him. I think that it's a fine choice if you like it. I think I haven't taken them a lot, and they also, it's worth pointing out, don't do anything for the more experimental war machines like the flame cannon, the organ gun, because they're just not going to go near those and touch them because they're too liable to blow up, is what it says. But totally lost my train of thought on that. But anyways, I think that, the engineer is an okay choice, but you could take him or leave him and probably be all right.
I'll note that I think he's better in this book than the Empire one because the Empire army is so cheap to where you want it. You're always going to use all your character slots. Like there's, the character, like a captain's 50 points. Now this has a thing for 55, so maybe I'm undoing my own argument here. But I feel like this army as a whole is more expensive, so I could see being like, oh, maybe we won't use all my characters, so maybe I'll have a free slot that I can just throw in a 65-point guy.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about my Thane maybe isn't even going to get into the combats I want him to be in,
maybe
but
I
the
just
engineer is going to be getting his abilities the whole game.
Right,
and
you don't need their leadership, again, as noted, really. So maybe this just, maybe you could have an engineer general at 1,000 points. That would be fun.
That would be.
What about a Dragon Slayer?
I would say exactly the same things I said about the Demon Slayer and have nothing else to add.
I think he's better, but just for his points cheaper. I am sad he's tough 4. I wish he was tough 5. I'm going to complain about that all the day. And he should have another axe, and he's fine. I think he's better because he's taking up a less important slot, but that's it.
Yeah. All right, first up for core choices, we have Warriors. I think these guys are an absolutely amazing core choice for their points. They're tough 4, like we talked about, leadership 9. That's slowed down, of course, by their move 3. But they're super customizable in this version of the book where they start with light armor, but you can upgrade them to heavy armor. You can get them the shields. You can go from that 6+ save all the way down to a 3-up with parry if you want. They're just super
great
resilient.
Weapons.
Yeah, and you can take great weapons as well. And get a little bit less armor, but that's offset by the toughness 4, so it doesn't end up feeling as bad as taking great weapons on humans that are only tough 3, for example.
Right.
Or halberds, for example, would be the more appropriate comparison there. But yeah, I think these guys are really great. They're 10 plus, I think, for unit size.
Yep.
And the more I've played dwarfs, the more I've realized that these guys are just like, I just take lots of these units because they're so useful to have a bunch of, and they're just great at holding the line. They're cheaper than the special units, and so you don't feel as bad if one of them breaks and runs. So yeah, I love them. What do you think?
I think they're probably the best core melee by far. I guess that's not really saying much. They might be one of the best melees in the whole book, actually, for my money, just because of how efficient they are in terms of points, as you mentioned. I like heavy armor and shields, so 9 points a bloke.
Yeah.
Their weapons skill 4 too, I'll note,
that's
which
good, yeah.
A lot of armies wish they had on their core trooper.
Right, which means they're hitting on 3s against a lot of other regular units.
Right, and most people are hitting them on 4s. And again, thinking them as a defensive bulwark, they're only getting hit half the time. They might only be getting wounded half the time.
Or a third of the time.
Or a third of the time. And then you got a 3-up armor save. Maybe not a lot of these guys are dying. So you might not be killing a lot, because offensively, you might argue, they're only strength 3. They're just a human with a sword. Sure, they are. Right. They're a swordsman offensively.
Yeah, but that's the dwarfs aren't here to kill stuff. They're here to not die.
Right. And then you just kind of grind them down, and then maybe basically because you're just going to win with static res. I think the idea with these guys is you've blipped off a couple rank bonuses on the way in from whatever's coming in, or at least lower their numbers. Then they charge in. They don't do very much. You didn't get to pick the charge, so they probably tried to do something advantageous, but then despite their best efforts, they've failed because you're so tough. And even if they win, I lost by 1, I'm still leadership 8. Oh, there's the BSB over there. Yeah, I got an 8 rerollable. Yeah, I'm probably fine. Yeah. So I think they're fantastic. Also, their full command is reasonable. Mm-hmm. The only thing they're really missing, if you want to call it that, is they can't take a magic banner, which is probably good, because otherwise I would struggle.
And I think
to
there's
want
no
to take
lore
anything
reason
else.
to do that. I think it helps make the special units feel more special that these guys can't. I will say that despite everything you're saying being true on paper, I have gotten absolutely mulched by dwarf warriors, where I think things like Croxagores, when they run in, they will kill a ton of them because they're strength 6.
Strength 7.
Strength 7.
Yes.
So then they're wounding them on 2s.
Yep.
So yeah.
So
that
there's
hurts.
definitely
And
some weaknesses. I could see that's a good point you bring up. I think dwarves as an army are uniquely weak to monstrous infantry, where they're just like high strength, just random number of attacks, and they just kind of punch through that armor or whatever, and their high speed is like exacerbated because there's no heavy cav coming in to kind of threaten the monstrous infantry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I could see that definitely being a scary matchup, especially if they come from a way where you don't get a lot of shots into them prior. It can definitely be
I think
difficult.
that's another thing is a lot of the games I've played, I haven't taken much of a gun line. I've only had one or two
play pretty
units.
aggro.
Yeah. And so I think that doesn't help. So I think we'll talk about this later, but there's a lot of reasons that this army wants you to play as a gun line because you kind of need to soften up the enemy as they come in to help make sure you've got that static res bonus coming for you. But I think the other thing is just the way that you deploy matters a lot more here to try to get the matchups that you want so that your dwarf warriors aren't right across from the Croxagores, etc.
Sure.
And that can help a lot as well. But yeah, most games I've played, it feels like a hole has been punched in my lines because of either a poor deployment choice on my part or things just getting a little disordered somewhere or a bad break test roll. And
it's hard to fix because you're slow.
Yeah, exactly. So that on paper, these guys are perfect, but in practice, you still have to be a little careful with how you use them, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I think that's fair to say.
Next up, we have crossbow men, not crossbow dwarfs, which is interesting.
That's true, yeah.
But crossbowmen, the handguns just seem so much better to me for only 2 points more. These guys are 12 points a pop, and they do have move or fire, so they can't move and shoot their crossbows, and the crossbows don't have armor piercing, so they're only -1 to the armor save.
Yeah.
They are, a 30-inch range, though?
That is literally the only advantage in the cost, I guess.
But since most battles start 24 inches apart, there's not a ton of opportunity to use that extra range.
It basically comes down to you get a half range shot at 15.
That's true. That's true.
But again, dwarf handguns are getting +1 at 12, so that might, for my money,
still be worth 2 points.
Undo it a little bit.
Yeah, so they're super cool, and I think this is another thing where Redmayne, as he's explaining things throughout the book, is like, the crossbow's reliable because it's old. The handgun's kind of newfangled. I mean, they're good, but they're not as reliable as a crossbow. So I think there's fluff reasons to certainly take them, and if you're trying to save a few points, not bad. As with any core ranged unit, I think they suffer from having to take a minimum unit size of 10.
Yep.
Because if you're not going to get a hill, it's hard to place these. I will say that it's a tactic you can use. This is true for both crossbowmen and thunderers. That doesn't work as well with other armies due to the leadership situation, but you can deploy them in their full 10 wide line just in front of your other troops. And because of the way fleeing works in 6th edition, you can flee from a charge and just kind of funnel between your units and pop out the back without causing any trouble. Because
you
they'll
don't
typically bend
into your guys and cause panic or whatever. Yeah.
And then even if there's a fleeing unit at the start of a turn, if they're a lower unit strength than the units nearby, those units won't panic. So typically you're going to have a higher unit strength in those other core blocks of troops that you have in your battle line. And then you're just much more likely to rally with your leadership 9, especially if you pop a musician in there, get that +1.
Yeah, leadership 10.
So I would highly recommend that if you're not getting a hill or you're not really sure how to deploy your gun line. I think it's much better to do that sort of in front of your main line, flee from the charge perhaps, depending on the range. If they're just going to slam right into your guys behind you, maybe consider some other options. But I think even so, it's better to have them run into your main melee blocks than your other guys. And if they do break from combat, then that does cause panic. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Indeed.
But anyways, I'm just kind of talking about range generally now. But do you have anything else to say about the crossbowmen?
I wanted to pose a question before we move on.
Yeah.
So I've done some reading into this. What do you feel about the shield option? And then along with that, how would you feel about, say, a unit of 16? And let me throw this out there. 8 wide to start, 2 ranks. But then as they get close, you reform into 4x4.
I have done that, and it is good.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't done it with 18, but I've done it with
16,
12.
Sorry, I think I said it wrong.
You might have said 16. Anyways, I've done it with 12 and then formed up into a 4x3. And I think dwarfs is the army you can do it with because there's still weapon skill 4.
Especially with thunderers because you can do it and still shoot.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah.
that's one benefit to dwarf ranged units, is that they're able to hold their own because they're essentially the exact same stats as dwarf warriors. They have a hand weapon. It's just they also have a ranged weapon.
At that point, they'll be a 4-up armor in close combat. So, like, better swordsmen defensively.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's a viable tactic.
Okay. I was just curious. But yeah, no, I don't have anything further to say other than they're expensive per guy. So comparing them, I keep going back to Empire because that's one we've reviewed. So you're paying almost double per gun.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is the gun probably better? Is the body that the gun is being held by better? Yes. But in terms of absolute just number of bullets headed downrange, it is going to be fewer. So,
yeah. Next up is Thunderers. And yeah, these guys are identical to the crossbowmen, but just have the gun instead of the bow. So they are really good for all the reasons we talked about the dwarf handgun being good. Move and fire, +1 at half range. Same thing, just give them a musician. That way, if you need to flee from a charge, that you can still rally more easily. Consider the shields, like Grant's saying, and they can be a viable combat unit in melee as well.
I think it could be cute too, just inching up 3 inches a turn with your whole line, kind of, with these guys moving up and just shooting. Now, sure, you're getting probably the -1 for moving and shooting, but might be cute way to kind of move forward.
I think it would depend on the army. I wouldn't do that against a cavalry heavy force.
Sure. Okay. I should clarify. Yeah, definitely not like matchup in regardless.
Sure.
But if there's, say, a scenario where we play somewhere you have to like actually take something. And that sometimes I feel like for dwarves, it's just like, well, I can't win. But like maybe this is a way where you can kind of maybe begin to see that happening. Maybe turn 1, you're able to move. Pardon me, still get some ranged fire. And then also move up some of your other units slightly at least. Especially if you deploy in such a way that maybe you march right up behind them. So your melee units are a little farther behind to start with, so to speak, and then they move up 3, and then you march 6 or whatever from behind. But no, I think Thunderers are good. I think they're probably better than crossbowmen just because of move and fire, unfortunately, because I think I like crossbows better thematically. But
yeah,
I'm an old
But again,
soul.
I don't think you'll ruin your game if you pick one over the other. So I think
let's go crossbows.
One thing that's great about this book is most of the options are viable. Which isn't always the case for every army. But
speaking of options that are viable, what do you think of miners?
These are some of the coolest models
I
have ever seen. I absolutely love them. The 6th edition, or I think they were even
the
5th edition medals. But they have candles stuck on their helmets for their mining in the tunnels. Super cool. And they're very thematic. So they're digging tunnels under the battlefield, and then they can pop up from any table edge when they arrive. But it's very random. So starting on turn 2, they'll show up on a 4+, then a 3+, then a 2+, but then it stays a 2+, and they may just never show up. So that's tough to spend a lot of points. How many are they per guy?
I believe they are 11.
11, yeah.
12, sorry.
12. So
even worse.
They're essentially just dwarf warriors with a great weapon and heavy armor. Like that's their profile, which would cost 10 points normally. So you're paying 2 points, I think.
And they have more expensive command options.
Yeah, so more expensive command, and then you're paying 2 points for that underground advanced special rule that lets them pop up. Now, this is something that gives mobility to a very static army because you can pop up suddenly behind enemy lines, which they would rarely expect dwarfs to be able to get to their back line like that. So that can be handy. But yeah, it's just, I think, a hard sell for the variability on when and if they even show up.
Yeah, for me, and there's 0-1, so you can only have one, I guess, because they didn't want you to, I don't know, just deep strike your whole army or whatever. These, I think, are the unit that I want to love the most. Yeah. But I'm the most disappointed by the rules implementation of what the lore is.
Yeah, what would you like to see?
There's a similar-ish rule in the Skaven book for gutter runners where they can kind of deploy out of the ground. They're able to like charge and move immediately. I think that would be too powerful for these guys because the only reason I think it's remotely fair for the gutter runners is they're skirmishers and they don't have ranks, so they can't like show up in the back and then get a rear charge and now you're just -3 because you lost all your static res or whatever. And these guys would be like, if I could just choose, and then you kind of get rid of the movement 3 weakness too. But showing up on a table edge is too much. So I wish they could pick a spot anywhere, appear there, and then maybe just not be able to charge that turn. That's what I wish.
That would be a nice small change.
Right.
And honestly, if you're playing with a consistent group of people, you're not going to tournaments, maybe that's something just to
I would try
and play around with and just see how people feel
maybe
about
do
it.
a scatter. I don't know. Maybe
that could be fun.
They dug the hole slightly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Pick a spot. I would do it almost like a deep strike in 40K, frankly, and just say they can't charge. So they show up. Maybe they get shot at, but maybe it's a big unit of 20 of them, right? They'll be okay. They're dwarves. They're leadership 9. But then at least they show up. What I've experienced, and I'm the bad guy in all these experiences too, is they show up and then the other army goes, okay, they're over there. I'm going to go this way. And because they're dwarves, they can't catch you. Yeah.
So unless you're showing up within 3 inches of them, they're probably going to outpace you.
Even then. Because you don't get to charge when you show up, right? You just like march on, and then they go, okay, I'm movement 4, I march 8. Too late. Like, I just, it seems so hard. So you have to like show up in a very specific spot that's close to something that doesn't want to move at all.
So essentially war machine hunting is kind of the main thing that you can do with them.
And maybe there's some kind of objectives that I could see being kind of cool, but I just wish I feel like this is a really cool unit that's let down by Underground Advance being too restrictive.
Yeah, for matching up with that move 3.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. So I usually end up using these models as just great weapon warriors because I don't want to not use them because they're amazing models, but they just fit in perfectly for, I just call them like the auxiliary picks or something like that. And they're just warriors with great weapons. Next up, we have Rangers. I think, unfortunately, these guys have a lot of similar issues where they're like a really themey, really awesome unit in the lore, but then their rules just kind of fail to play out in a way that's useful for how many points they cost. Again, love these models. They look really awesome. They're sort of like the Bugman's, Joseph Bugman's Rangers.
Yeah.
But they are, again, essentially just dwarf warriors with light armor and great weapons by default.
Don't even get heavy armor, but I guess they're scouty guys.
Yeah, they're supposed to be scouty. But then they also come with the scout rule. So that means you can deploy ahead of the rest of the force out of line of sight or a certain distance from the enemy. And they have the foresters special rule, which means that they can move freely through woods specifically, so they don't get slowed down by that. So that's, again, a really powerful mobility tool for an otherwise very slow static army. So I think that sounds really enticing. I think it gives you the opportunity to potentially do some march blocking, which again can be very helpful for the dwarfs to try to get the matchups that you want or try to prevent a charge happening where you don't want it or when you don't want it, sort of a thing. So I think that they do have some utility, but they're really expensive. And if you actually kit them out, crossbows cost 5 points per guy.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
That's crazy, especially because they're not move and fire.
And they're not any better than normal crossbowmen. So they're just crossbowmen that show up front, I guess, and have a great weapon. So,
which maybe, so the problem is, even if you deploy them in the woods out of sight so that you can get closer, you still have to move the first turn to get to the edge of the woods so that they can see people. So you're not shooting that turn.
Yeah.
And then you're maybe shooting the next turn. But so I think it just gets really dicey. And it's, again, on paper, like with the miners, it sounds cool. But I think in practice, it doesn't end up working out often enough to feel like it. And if you fully kit them out with everything that's on the model itself, so you're giving them the shield, you're giving them the crossbow, all that stuff, that's 18 points per model.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
So expensive. That's like, what, like a pistolier is like 18 points or something.
That's a temple guard.
Yeah. So
and they're not as killy as temple guard.
Yeah.
Sorry. Or survivable.
I think one thing I would maybe pay these points for is if they were also skirmishers. I think this was an awesome opportunity for the dwarfs to have a different unit type, because otherwise everything is just rank and file infantry in this army. This would have been so cool to just have that little bit of flexibility, get the skirmishers, maybe even give them a cool special rule like, what is it, the beastmen that can rank up but also be skirmishers kind of thing.
Yeah, they have that like raiders thing.
So something like that could be cool on them. So again, if you want to house rule something like that, I think honestly these guys you're just not going to really take if you don't do something like that.
For me, these miners and rangers, both 0-1 core units, are kind of the I don't want to say bad, but they're probably the worst units in the book.
I would agree. They're some of the coolest and some of the least useful when it actually comes to playing.
The problem is warriors are so good which is I'm happy about.
Mm-hmm.
But they're literally just warriors with a bunch of bad rules stapled onto them. And maybe not bad rules. Well, I would argue bad for the miners. Because I think Scout and Forester is
Those
good.
are great rules.
But it's not enough for the Rangers with their kit.
Yeah. If you were going to do Rangers, I would recommend the throwing axes over the crossbows because you can throw those after moving.
Sure.
And you can't, getting stuck in with them isn't a bad idea, especially if you take a
you can
minimum
stand and
sized
shoot
unit.
with them too, right?
Yeah. So I think taking just 10 of them, don't do any command or anything like that, and then just use them to just get in the way of somebody, kill a few of them on the way in. Could be fun, could be slow down the army, break up their battle line a little bit. So I think I would say that's maybe a more viable way to run them than crossbows.
I agree. I think you want to keep them cheaper to minimize the investment, because part of the thing is too, nobody's going to be coming up to support them.
Right.
If you scout far ahead, like really far, now you don't have to. But if you're not doing that, then why didn't you just bring more warriors? But neither here nor there. But if so, you put them up medium. I mean, it might be 2 or 3 turns before anyone's even remotely close, and the enemy's going to get there a lot sooner.
Yeah. And I mean, in certain matchups, maybe they are really good. And like, again, it's very terrain dependent. But if you can get a good spot where you can get into their back line and take out some war machines, then they could be really good. But again, I think it's just too dependent on what the battlefield ends up looking like.
And we play, I think, on pretty terrain heavy boards generally that would favor them.
Yeah.
So.
And even then, we've had some trouble using them. But just because I suck at using something doesn't mean they're not good.
Right. Tell us how to use Rangers.
Yeah. All right, we're moving into special now. And the first one up here is Hammerers. They are a 0-1 special choice, so you can only take one of them.
Yep.
They have the special rule Bodyguard of the King, so they gain the Stubborn rule, which means they're always taking break tests at full leadership, but only if the general is in their unit. So they have to be bodyguarding the general to get that.
Yep.
This does help offset their lack of armor. So they're only heavy armor. So they're only a 5-up save. They've got great weapons with their big hammers. So they're not going to be getting the parry save, although they do come with hand weapons and you can give them shields, right?
Yes, you can.
So
if
you could choose to fight with hand weapon and shield and get up to that 3-up save like Dwarf Warrior.
You could be like a pseudo Longbeard.
Yeah. But again, then why are you taking them? I guess they're
stubborn.
Cool. They're hammers. Why would you not use the hammers?
I agree. I like the great weapon option, and I think great weapons pair well with stubborn.
Yeah, and all the special level dwarfs get strength 4 and weapon skill 5, so that bump up from the core choice dwarfs,
which is significant.
Yeah, so now with a great weapon, you're strength 6. That's pretty baller. Weapon skill 5 means you're hitting even more people on a 3.
And garbage guys are hitting you on 5s.
Yeah.
So goblins hit you on 5s. A lot of undead hit you on 5s.
Yeah. I would say comparing them to Longbeards, though, which we'll get into in a second, I think they're only worth taking if you're going to put the general with them, because you're paying a premium for that special rule that only works if the king's there. I guess that kind of forces you to choose your army in a lore-friendly way, because the hammers wouldn't be there if the king wasn't there.
Right.
It's kind of an idea. But they can also take I think all the special choices here can take a runic standard up to 50 points. So we already kind of laid out some of the useful ones of those earlier. But that could be something to consider as well. Anything else on the hammers?
I think they do exactly what they say on the tin. They are going to be your bulwark of bulwarks. I mean, probably the toughest unit to shift if you've got a lord in there and a BSB in 12.
Yeah, I think the only thing that counters that is the fact that with just armor 5, high strength stuff are going to, they'll just cut through the unit.
So you might want to go bigger.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because you're right. Yeah, they're 14 points a bloke. But I could see this being fun, like with a really big unit of 23 or 22. Maybe you put 2 characters in there, go 6 wide. I like wider with great weapon units.
Definitely get more of those hits. Yeah,
because there's going to be a time, especially when your weapon skill 5, where somebody's rolling to hit and they just botch it. I see it at least once a game, and they get like 2 hits out of like 9 attacks or something on 4s, and then they only kill like either nothing or 1 guy, and then you swing back with maybe 6 great hammer attacks, and then also your lord, who's probably got another 4 at least, and then you're just clubbing guys, because again, weapon skill 5, strength 6, so you're like a better knight. Just so that's pretty darn good aggressively when they do get to swing.
So So cool unit. Now, something you'll see, there's this Hammerers, Longbeards, Ironbreakers are sort of the 3 core dwarf special infantry, and they're all basically the same with minor variations in their equipment and their special rules. So next up we have Longbeards, same exact stats, but they have that immune to panic like we talked about earlier in the narrative lore section, so they aren't going to flee due to panic, which is really handy, again, especially if you're doing some of those tactics where you're going to flee with a unit of like a larger unit of your ranged weapons, or if you do have a dwarf warrior unit that breaks next to them due to some really big alpha charge thing that's happening. So that's really handy. I think the immune to panic is great for the dwarf army. And I think they're the same points, right?
Yeah, they're 14 points as well.
But they come with a shield.
Yep, they are almost like they're tankier in terms of armor. So these guys are rocking up with a 3-up.
Right.
Armor.
But they also do have great weapons, so they could go flip back to the 5-up and be hammers if they want.
You're right. So they're like more versatile. For me, I see these guys as like a centrally placed, but that's the problem. So I would say the same thing about the hammer.
Yeah.
It kind of gets into a role issue, like which one does the job better. I don't know. Probably depends on the situation, because sometimes you do want immune to panic if something's really going wrong, but other times you might just really want that bodyguard stubborn 9.
Right.
Something in my heart tells me I like Longbeards better basically whenever I don't have that bodyguard active. So if I
absolutely,
am not
because
going
you're
to
paying the same points,
right.
but then you get a rule versus you don't get a rule,
right.
and you get a shield versus you don't get a shield.
Right.
So if you're not using the bodyguard thing, Longbeards are just categorically better.
Right.
And the models are way cooler. This may be my favorite model of all time. The sculpts for the Longbeards from the 5th, 6th edition medals.
They are very long beards indeed.
So cool. They are just perfect. I just love them through and through. And I'm just so overjoyed to have a full unit of 24 of them. They're just so cool.
They are pretty neat.
So I would always choose them just for that. But
I wish they had initiative 3, but that would be kind of non-dwarfy of them.
Especially because they're old.
And they're old. But I guess when I think of them as like they're the veterans, so they're better fighters or whatever.
I guess I would give that to Hammerers, and then maybe they'd feel worth taking.
The problem is they have great weapons.
Oh, so they're going last anyways,
right,
yeah.
So, but, I mean, so do Longbeards. But I think they're fine. I don't know. I have a hard time saying anything differently, because it's just like, what are they good at? They're good at holding the line. Strength 4 is awesome. I kind of like them taking with just fighting with the heavy armor and shield better, just because they're strength 4. So they're still hitting a little bit harder in combat than your warriors are, which are only strength 3. So these guys are negating at least 1 of an armor save.
Yeah. And I love that they just have the option. So since they come with the great weapon, depending on who you're up against, if it's somebody with a lot of armor, like for example, knights, you kind of have to do the great weapons, or you're just never going to get through that 2-up armor save.
Right.
And so, I would choose the great weapons every time in that matchup.
And if you get the charge, if you get the fabled charge, I'm sure they happen mostly counter charges, I would imagine. You just a block of 20 of these guys coming in on the side, and you just say, they're swinging with great weapons. They're gonna crump people. Yeah.
They can also, like we said, take the runic standard up to 50 points. If you can't decide, just put a rune of battle on there. +1 combat res is always good.
Seems good to me.
And then next up is Ironbreakers. These may be, I think, the best option of the 3.
I think they are.
They come with Gromril by default, and a shield, and a hand weapon. They're not allowed to take great weapons, so that's what kind of differentiates them alongside with the Gromril armor that they get. But that means that they're toughness 4 with a 2-up save as infantry, which I think is the only unit in the game that can do that.
Chaos Chosen
can do it. Okay. Oh, because they have the chaos armor. Yeah.
Because but they cost like 20 points a model. So these guys are 13.
Yeah. So they cost less than the Longbeards, less than the Hammerers, and they're more survivable. So I think there's this idea like stubborn. Okay, you're not going to have the negative combat res affecting your leadership. Immune to panic, like, okay, that helps. But if you just never die because you have a 2-up save,
you're not going to lose the combat.
Right. Yeah. So then it doesn't matter. So that's like, these guys are amazing. I kind of am surprised that they're not 0 to 1, because you just fill up all your special choices with these guys.
The only thing is they're so, and this is like saying, oh, they're so good at this, so it's a weakness. But because they're so reliant on the 2-up, there are some like spells and things that ignore that, which kind of makes them,
which we've seen
a little one note. I could see things like, I know I've used drain life, and there's, I think, a shadow spell as well. Now,
those are at least be more survivable than Empire Knights with their toughness 4.
Indeed, this is true. And honestly, these guys, because they're toughness 4, are probably better equipped than a lot of armies to survive those types of things.
But you're right, that does create an Achilles heel for them because they become the target for those spells.
Right. So yeah, they could. And again, they're slow. I really like them though. I feel like every time I've seen them in battle reports and anytime they're used, they always do well.
Yeah.
Because they're so consistent. Because again, 2-up armor save.
I've had a unit of these guys hold for 3 turns against a dual Bretonnian Knight charge, one of which was into their flank, and they just held and they just never died.
Right.
It was wild.
Because they're just like, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So they seem amazing.
I think your point about the magic would then lead me to think maybe using their runic standard to get one of those +1 dispel dice or +1. I think, it's just like the magic resistance 1. So +1 dispel dice against things targeting them.
Sure.
Just to help offset that. Because if they're now something that's a magnet for magic,
right?
Maybe because usually if you give yourself the magic resistance, then people just won't shoot magic.
Yeah, they don't even try.
So then this kind of helps maybe balance that out, where now it gives your opponent a difficult choice. Do they want to do that or not? So
no, I think these guys kind of come away being alongside the warriors. The best generally, unless again, I think hammers cheat because I think stubborn is that good in a lot of situations.
Yeah, but, so if you've got the Lord in there.
So if you got the Lord, I think hammers, boom, go. If you don't, I think you want to go iron breakers most of the time. And the fact that they're cheaper than the other two guys
is wild.
I think they should be more expensive.
Yeah.
I think these guys should cost 15.
I agree. But I'm glad they don't. But also I will still always take a unit of Longbeards in every single Dwarf Army I ever play. Because they're so cool.
There you go.
And then the last special, well, it's not the last special choice, but the last infantry special choice is Slayers. They're also 0-1. This is a classic thing for a unit like this. It's similar to Flagellants and that sort of thing, where they're a tar pit. So they're unbreakable. They're never going to flee from combat. And that just means that they're really great for holding up a flank or intercepting a really strong hammer unit to prevent them from hitting where they want to be hitting with them. But they have no armor, so they're incredibly fragile when it comes to missile fire and magic. Obviously, toughness 4 helps balance that out a little bit, but I've had these guys just get completely annihilated before they even made it into combat because of that. But that does mean that shooting was all going into them and not other things in my army, so maybe it works out. But they also have that Slayer rule we talked about, which is they always count as having at least an equal toughness to their enemy, or strength to equal their enemy's toughness to wound on a 4, and they always count as having 2 hand weapons for 11 points a model. So I think they're pretty solid.
I think they're amazing. I feel like they're the ultimate flank unit.
Yeah, because I take one in every army that I take usually. I usually do 12. I don't feel like I need a giant unit. I'm usually trying to have enough to hold up the enemy for 2 turns.
Sure.
Depending on who I'm matching against. Again, Croxagores might mulch that many in 1 turn. But I feel like most of the time 12 is enough. Well, if they've lost a few to magic or shooting on the way in, I guess. But,
fair enough.
These guys also
will probably.
Yeah, these guys also have a really interesting option where they can take as many champion upgrades as they want to giant slayers.
That is cute.
And so for 15 points per model, you could turn the entire unit into champions, which gives them +1 weapon skill, +1 strength, +1 initiative, and +1 attack. So they are one of like the most bolstered champion choices in any army. Usually you're just getting +1 attack.
It would be fun in a 3,000 point game to take a super slayer unit with like 12 or 15 giant slayers and just be like, here we go. I don't know. I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
And
with the +1 attack, they're 3 attacks.
3 attacks each. Now they're just straight up 4, a threat.
Yeah.
A lot.
Wait, are they strength 4? Or do they go
they're
to strength
4?
5?
They're strength 4, but
By
they have
default?
the slayer. By default, they're 4. The normal ones are 3. Troll slayers are 3.
Okay, yeah.
Giant
So they go up to
slayers
4
are
if
4.
you give them giant. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's still solid. So yeah, I think that could be a lot of fun.
But I think they're good just because anything with the word unbreakable on it is good.
Agreed. And so if your army has that option, usually it's going to be a very utility, versatile unit that you want to have.
These guys are kind of unique, unlike some like swarms and stuff, where these guys can and probably will take some with them too. they're pretty darn fighty.
Yeah.
So with the
I think the problem I always run into is I never have any left because they always strike last.
They strike last. They have really bad initiative.
I guess to clarify, they don't have the rule always strikes last. It's just they have such a low initiative that they're usually striking last.
Right. Well, they're slow in terms of movement, so they get charged.
Right.
Then when they live,
to,
they have low initiative.
So there's been many turns where or many games where I've rolled no attacks with my Slayers.
Right.
But because of their toughness 4, they still hold up the enemy for 2 turns, which I will say is really lame. And I hate not ever being able to make attacks because my whole front rank just keeps dying.
And
that's just sad. But they still do their job. And so I think if you can back up to that level of it, then it's still okay. And
we just need to play 8th edition, obviously.
All right, into the war machines, we've got a cannon, a bolt thrower, and a stone thrower. These are the bog standard rules for cannons, bolt throwers, and stone throwers as found in the main rule book. It is worth pointing out that this is the regular cannon, not the great cannon that the Empire has.
D3 wounds instead of
D6.
wounds
And 48-inch range instead of 60-inch range. So a little bit different. But
bolt throwers are 1 for 2.
Yep,
or
like
2
usual.
for 1 or whatever.
So that's nice to be able to do, especially against cavalry or other heavy infantry units even, just to slice through the ranks like that. And then there's a number of runes that you can put on these to make them a little more reliable is the main thing that the engineering runes do. You got Rune of Reloading. This might be my favorite, which is you can only put this one on the cannon, but you can always keep firing regardless of a misfire chart result, and as long as you have at least 1 crew member. So a lot of the misfire results are you can't fire next turn.
Yeah.
But this means, yes, you sure can, because it's just more reliable. The Rune of Reloading. You can get the Rune of Forging for the cannon as well. This lets you re-roll your artillery die when you roll a misfire, which happens to me often enough that I like having that. You can get the Rune of Accuracy to re-roll Scatter for the stone thrower for 25 points. The Rune of Fortune for 25 lets you re-roll the misfire chart result, so you're still getting a misfire, but if you rolled the 1 and it was about to blow up, then at least you can try to not blow up.
Yeah.
And then Flaxen's Rune of Seeking is a little oddball, but it's 25 points and it's +1 for a bolt thrower, but only to hit for a bolt thrower, but only against flyers.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
But I guess watch out, Great Eagles or Pterodons.
There you go. I like I'm just pointing out, I like Rune of Penetrating on a...
That's +1 strength for the bolt thrower?
Strength on a bolt. Technically, it says on a war machine.
Oh, so not even just specifically.
So I wonder if you put that on a stone thrower, which has a AoE.
Ooh, yeah.
Does that make the AoE, and tell us listeners, I'm not sure, it's probably in effect, does that make the AoE hits go to strength 5?
Yeah, I actually don't know
what I mean? I think that would be really good.
That'd be good bang for buck since you're getting more hits.
And then also, I actually think it's good on the bolt thrower too, because a lot of times strength 6 is excellent, but after it drops down, you'll kill like maybe 2 guys.
Right.
You know?
So if you're getting that extra
strength, but if you're getting on strength
3,
7, maybe
4.
you're getting 3 or 4 if you roll really good. And I think for 25 points, especially if you're shooting at targets that are expensive, like you typically are, that can quickly pay for itself.
That's a good point.
So I like Rune of Penetrating.
Yeah,
all that to say that.
1 extra Empire Knight with it, and it's almost paid for.
And you're pretty much done. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say? These are pretty standard war machines.
No, I think they're very aggressively costed, which I like because I think this army is pretty expensive in terms of its units. So it's nice that they can still afford a good number of these, especially the bolt throwers. 45 points for 1.
Yeah, so cheap.
Love it.
I will say it is always hard for me to make my special choice options, choices, because there's so many in here, and I want to take at least a couple war machines, but I want to take some iron breakers. I have to take some longbeards. You got to have the Slayer, and then all of a sudden you have too many good options.
Right.
So I do have trouble
Spoiled
with that.
For choice, for sure.
But I would say the dwarfs will definitely do well if you have a war machine or 2 to help soften up the enemy before they get to you, or potentially even break an enemy unit before it gets to you. So would recommend finding some space for 1.
Too.
Also that they can't just wait around for you to slowly shamble across the field at them. Moving on to rare.
Here we go.
We have the organ gun
I'm
up
curious
first.
What you say about this?
Well, first I want to say Redmayne's story about how this got invented was an engineer who had an ear for music tried to make a new musical contraption called an organ, but it sounded horrible. So another engineer laid it on its side and made it fire grape shot, and now everybody loves it. So funny little origin story for the organ gun. But this is essentially the same thing as grape shot from a cannon. It just has an 18-inch range instead of an 8-inch range. So you pick a target, roll the artillery die, and that's the number of hits that you get on the unit. And those are strength 5 hits at -3 armor save. So that's really, really good, especially against heavily armored enemies. The trouble is that short range.
Yeah,
so it might only
18
get
inches.
to fire once or twice, especially if it's against cavalry. So I think that can be really tough. I think it can be tough to then protect it. If you could maybe keep it on a hill or tuck it between 2 units and an inch back so it's not going to get charged, then maybe you can keep it safe. But yeah, I think that's just the downside to it is it's a relatively short range for quite a few points and a whole rare slot to not be able to use it as much. That being said, I have had luck with it helping deal with threats in my back line because it's auto hits. It's great for dealing with skirmishers. And I've had Bretonnian Knights blast through my line and then wheel around to come back, and I just turn the organ gun towards them and then shoot them because they're right there in my back line now.
And then they died?
Yes. Well, actually, I think I killed most of them, and then they still ran down the organ gun. But it felt savage. Good.
Well, you took a lot of them with you, at
it
least.
Still felt cool. But this and the flame cannon are less reliable, so their misfire chart is worse. They blow up on a 1 or a 2. So, yeah, that's a little rough. So, pros and cons. Again, the engineer can't go in here. And I can't remember. Can you put engineering runes on these?
I was under the impression you couldn't, but that's a good question. Because if you could put Rune of Forging on here, that is expensive.
Some of them specifically say for a cannon, like Rune of Forging is only a cannon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
No, only dwarf cannons, stone throwers, and bolt throwers can be inscribed with runes.
Well, that really, yeah, that would help a lot. Obviously, you could put Rune of Penetrating on it. It's strength 6 now. Woo! But it's probably good enough as is. I do wish it was slightly. 125 is probably fair for it. I don't know. I wish the range was a little longer. 24 might be oppressive, but I feel like there's equivalent stuff in other armies. Yeah. It doesn't, for a rare choice, doesn't seem particularly egregious.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's fine, especially given the other rare choices. I don't know that it's like the worst choice, obviously. I think that against certain matchups, especially if it's an infantry army, then this is really good because you're going to get probably 2 rounds of shooting and maybe an extra round of shooting if you have some other way to slow them down. Maybe you've got your rangers up in a wood in the midfield so they're not marching.
And if you protect it well late game, this just turns into an 18-inch radius of you don't go over here.
Yeah.
Which if you place
That's a good point. It can also just be area denial in general as you're deploying stuff. If you don't want them to put their alpha strike unit in a certain part, drop this down early in your deployment. Yeah.
This is a thing where it's like you point it out to your opponent, be like, this just auto hits at its strength 5 -3 armor save, just so you know. And they're like, what? You're like, so it just kills a lot of things. And they're like, oh, what's the range? And then you tell them 18 and they're like, in your head, you're like, yeah, it's only 18. But to them, they're like sweating.
Yeah.
And they're like, 18 inches.
That's so much.
I can't get anywhere near that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think it does a similar thing psychologically as the Hellblaster volley gun. Next up, we have the Flame Cannon. I love this. It's so wild and totally different. Maybe there's some Skaven stuff that's like it. I'm not familiar with
There's some pretty weird Skaven stuff. We'll get to that later.
But this is a guess range and a flame template. So you guess a distance like a cannon, then you roll the artillery die and go that much more. Then you put down the flame template starting at that point and pointing in the direction of your shot directly in line. And then you hit as normal with the template. So fully covered on our auto hits, partially covered our 4-ups to add to the hit pool. And then that does strength 5, D3 wounds, -2 armor save.
D3 wounds particularly is savage because that just means characters might just die.
Yeah, which they'll still get lookouts through though, right?
I would assume so, but as we've seen, people fail those.
Yeah, it has happened. That happened in our last battle report.
It's just messing.
But yeah, so I think this is best against infantry because of the partial thing. So if you're hitting cavalry or like ogre stuff on larger bases, you're going to have 0 auto hits. You're only hitting on a 4+, and it's really easy to roll really bad when you're looking for 4+. So I think it can be not as useful against some of the things it would be best against, like multi-wound larger based models or heavily armored knights. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but really good against tightly packed infantry, really good against heavy infantry as well. With that -2 save and strength 5. So yeah, I think this is fun. It does have a unique misfire chart. So like the organ gun, it has an explosion on 1 to 2. It'll destroy your thing. But then also, as you take wounds on the cannon itself, it gets a -1 on its misfire chart result for each wound it's taken. So it's blowing up on a 1 through 4 if you only have 1 wound left on this thing.
Nice.
So it gets volatile pretty quickly. But I like that. It's fluffy. It makes sense that there's this
It's a flammable,
just pot of boiling chemicals. And so if it gets broken open, it's going to blow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like this as an option. I haven't painted mine yet, so I haven't taken one in practice. It does only have a 12-inch range. Like, you can only guess up to 12 inches. You could obviously then roll a 10 and go 22 plus the flame template. But it is short range, because if you're only guessing 12 and you could only roll 2, now you're not even hitting across the open field at the beginning of the game. But yeah, what do you think?
I think it's, again, kind of like organ gun. The way I see these two rare choices is these are like area denial. These are the, you come here, you get ouchies. Whereas the cannon, the bolt thrower, the grudge thrower, those are the come here. If you don't come here, you're just gonna get consistently, or at least more consistently, hurt. Maybe not as bad. Whereas these are like, hey, if you come here, then you get the real right hook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the other ones are annoying you. Oh, I'm losing 2 models from the stupid cannon every turn. I hate it. I'm losing my rank bonus, etc., etc. So you're running up, and then you're like, oh man, there's that flame cannon. And then you're like, well, do I just run in there and hope he guesses wrong? And then if he doesn't, maybe just all of a sudden 6 or 7 guys might have just got boiled alive. So it's, for me, these two things, it's almost more about the psychology than the unit itself, because I think they make the opponent play differently because of what they could do.
Yeah, which I think is very powerful for a dwarf player, because you're often the one that's having to react to the enemy. So this gives you a little bit of a initiative where you wouldn't normally have it, and kind of force them to make some decisions in response to you.
Yeah, and potentially funnel them towards the units that you want to
like
be,
your dwarf lord,
like
your dwarf not lord, get to fight anyone,
and your iron breakers, and your whatever, not your thunderers, etc. So,
and then finally we have the gyrocopter, which is another favorite model of mine, specifically the 6th ed metal one with the bigger prop wings. I really like that one. I think it's probably just because I saw one when I was a kid and it's burned into my brain.
Respect.
Yep. So also finally found one of those online and bought it for a decent price, got it painted up, and it's one of my favorite units to run.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that this is like the best rare choice compared to those other two things, but I think, again, it's a fine choice. I think a lot of it depends on who you're up against. Just to lay out the basics here, it's the fastest unit in the army with a 20-inch fly move, so it can be zipping around compared to the rest of your army, which it's worth just pointing out, fly means you can't go into the woods at all, so that limits you a little bit. I do always forget this, though. Our flyers also -1 to hit with ranged weapons because they count as skirmishers. Because in the rules, it just says they count as skirmishers.
Typically, yes. I know I play pterodons that way.
And they're -1 to hit. Okay, so that's really helpful because this guy doesn't have a ton of wounds. I think it's just 3 wounds? Yeah.
Yeah, 3 wounds, toughness 5. The only thing I'm not sure is because this has, well, pterodons have multiple wounds too, though. Yeah, I don't know. Does this count as a unit strength of 1? Huh. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he does have the -1 to get hit. But yeah, no, sorry. I don't want to deter the discussion.
I would assume because it says he's a flyer, and if flyers count as skirmishers and skirmishers are -1 to hit, I would guess
let's do it. I like it. That makes sense to me.
But yes, I am fairly certain that all of the damage just go, because the pilot doesn't have a wounds or toughness listed.
He's just a strength for his
so there's
melee?
no like randomizing or anything. But so you can fight in melee with this thing, but it's only 1 attack and strength 3, so you really don't want to be in melee with this.
Yeah.
Another thing that's crazy with this is its crashes special rule, and so if it gets destroyed, it will fly 46 inches in a random direction, then it explode with the large blast template with strength 4, rolling for partial hits as normal with the template. And that also happens if you break from combat.
Yeah.
So the first time you break from combat, it just counts as destroyed, and then you're just going to fly off in 46-inch direct. Yeah, which I love, by the way. This feels like the giant tipping over kind of thing, where it just makes the death of this unit fun for both sides, because it's just exciting to see what happens. Where does it go? 46 inches? That's so far, potentially. So that's just a lot of fun. But it's just worth knowing. It also gets destroyed instantly on a strength 7 wound, like
so
a chariot.
So it's like a chariot.
Yeah. So you just want to be aware of those things if you're going to use this, because it has those fragile elements. So if you accidentally get caught out and get charged, that could be a really bad time. But if you're playing it well and your matchup is good for it, then this can be really powerful. So it flies around. Its primary attack is a steam gun, which, despite the name, is not just a bunch of steaming hot air. It's a steam powered like blast cannon. It's like grape shot kind of thing. Yeah. And so it's going to shoot out all of this hot lead. It is only strength 3, AP -1, but it is the flame template. So you could potentially hit a lot of guys with it. And against a lightly armored, low toughness infantry unit on 20 millimeter bases, that could be devastating. So you could do a ton of damage. I've taken out most of a unit of longbowmen with the peasant longbowmen with this. And
yeah, that's a good target.
Yeah, so really helpful for that type of a thing against Skaven, Empire, infantry. All of those would be pretty good against.
Elves would not like this.
Yeah, with their tough 3.
Tough 3, not a lot of armor,
Yeah.
and they're expensive.
Yeah, so I think the flexibility of this unit makes it a really good option for the dwarfs just because it's so much faster than the rest of the army. It can really, in a similar way that the anvil, where your opponent might be coming expecting the dwarfs to act a certain way, and now suddenly there's this thing that throws a wrench in their plans and they weren't really prepared to deal with it. It can be really helpful for that reason, in addition to just being hilarious and awesome.
Yeah, no, I love the hopscotching around, just steam gunning over and over. I think it could be very difficult to deal with if you don't have a skirmishing unit with 365 to kind of ward it off. Because really,
but with toughness 5, even then,
5,
yeah.
Really, the only weakness it has is, again, I think is like, I don't know, something that can somehow ward it off from that 8-inch. I think that's about what the flame template like is. Because if it gets charged, that's like super bad, right? So, because it's probably never going to win a combat ever.
Right.
Now it's leadership 9, but it might hold a couple rounds out of sheer dumb luck, maybe. But if something reasonable gets into it, it's probably just going to lose. And then, as we discussed, if it breaks from combat, it instantly
just
goes
destroyed.
And blows up.
Yeah.
So really, you just gotta basically avoid any chances of getting charged and probably flee in reaction to it, I would imagine, generally speaking, and hope that your leadership 9 rally is going to be enough, which it should be in the vast majority of cases. But yeah, I think you just play hopscotch with this and you steam gun, as you noted, medium to light infantry, hopefully ranked up for maximum target hits. And what I think is especially good about the gyro is those are the types of infantry that are typically good, is lots of cheap middle tier
infantry. That has a ton of combat resolution built in.
That's the stuff that's good in 6th, and this is good against that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like dwarves have a lot of options for dealing with high armor stuff if they want to explore into that, especially from shooting. They've got all these war machines, all these crazy things. They have access to handguns on core, so they have a lot of that stuff. This just gives them bucket of dice syndrome, which is always good because they don't have a lot of bucket of dice options other than maybe the organ gun and the flame gun, which I guess is all the rare choices.
How about that? So I will really also say it is, again, like the flame cannon, not great against cavalry or any large base thing because of the partial hits situation. It's really easy to just roll all under 4 when you're looking for a 4-up. You say that all the time in our games. 4-up seems really good, but it's really swingy.
4-up is, sometimes you're like, wow, I hit 7 out of 9 rolls, and then the next roll it's like I hit 2 out of 9 rolls. So whenever I see 4-ups, I'm like, this could go anyway. Yeah. As it should. It's 50-50. But
all right, the last option in the list is the Dogs of War, and the one thing I just want to say here, which I've said I think for most of these reviews, is that this just opens up the opportunity for you to dream big and take some of the lore inspiration you got from the book to come up with another unit. Like I was saying earlier, maybe that's some human mercenaries that are working alongside, or maybe even like they're not mercenaries. Maybe they're from the settlement your dwarfs are trying to buddy up to and be friendly with because their hold got taken over, and so they're trying to get the humans to help them retake their hold or something like that. One thing I've used this for is to bring some rune golems I printed, and they're really cool, and I could just take them and count them as ogres. So that would be something that's fully legal, put them on the right bases, but now they look really dwarfish, and it's just a fun, different thing. But if you have a cool group like ours is, then they can let you do fun, cool stuff. So in our last campaign, part of my objective was getting enough of this magical ore from the Lizardmen temples so that I could power my rune golems. And then in the final battle of the campaign, I got to break them out and then had bespoke rules that we wrote for them where they were based on ogres, but then they had these like runic empowerment things that my runesmith, Alwyn Branicle, could like improve their initiative or, give them different like +1 strength. I don't remember what all the things were, but
magic resist or something.
Yeah. So just dream big, do cool stuff, talk with your friends, have narrative, exciting times. All right. I think the next thing on our docket then is favorite art. What do you got?
I picked out for this book one right at the front, but
Nice.
not the front cover. Oh, not the front cover.
Okay.
Sorry. The literally as you open the book, it's this dwarf kind of just standing
Yes.
with a big axe, like
3
a
goblin
one-handed,
heads.
yes, with all the goblin heads, and he's just looking so menacing. I really like this because it lets you see the full dwarf form. That sounds kind of weird, but like I think dwarves in a lot of different fantasy settings are often very different in their stature. They're always short or whatever, and often bearded.
Yeah.
But the Warhammer or dwarves in particular are very like, I don't even know how to describe it. Their feet are, or their legs are so small. Like it's humorous almost. Like I don't
it's like
even.
their foot is as long as their leg is tall.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's startling where their knees are and how like where's the shin,
Yeah.
you know?
They're the
But
definition of stout.
indeed, and I just love the menacing glare he's giving. You kind of see it looks like he's inside a dwarven hall with those big pillars behind him, and you see kind of the runes inscribed on his cool axe and even all over his armor.
Yeah.
I don't know. This just shows me what the dwarves in Warhammer Fantasy are.
Mm-hmm.
And it even adds into the whole, they hate goblins, man. You got some big noses right there.
Yeah.
Love
I think
that
the space, like you mentioned, you can see there in this hall kind of gives you a sense of how vast the scale of these underground kingdoms that they've built are.
Yes.
There's like these stairs going up and back to this tiny little doorway at the top. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great pick. Totally agree with everything you said. The one I picked was for a similar reason, but it is on page 69. This, I think, was also the art on the Dwarf Warriors box of the era. But I really like this one. It's a whole sort of unit of clan warriors in the snow. They seem to be making a battle cry, about to engage with the enemy as they're sort of advancing forward. But you can tell they're advancing, but they're not really going quickly, which I think fits that sense of the dwarf stoicism. They also all have these looks of grim determination. It's almost like a forlorn look that they all have in their faces. They don't look excited to be here like the orcs they might be fighting would be excited to be here. So I think that really just plays into who the dwarfs are. They don't want to be fighting if they don't have to be fighting, but if they're going to fight, they're going to fight, and they're going to go down hard. Some cool just like terrain ideas in the back with these big statues kind of looming over them.
Yeah, that one, it almost looks like it's got hair on it.
Yeah, like it's almost alive. Like it's a rune golem.
Like it's a rune golem.
And then you see this maybe like entrance to a dwarf mine off to the right and things like that. But again, like you're saying, you kind of see the dwarf stature, how just buff and squat that they are. All this variety of different weapons that they have, how heavily armored they are, all the runes and the intricate designs embroidered into their clothing and things like that. So yeah, I think this is just really evocative and really kind of sets the tone. But as with all these books, there's so many good options. It's really hard to choose a favorite out of these. And again, just so many
you could pick pretty much anyone
too.
in here. They're all pretty darn good. This was kind of peak artwork for me.
Yeah.
It's very grimdark. I also like, I'm just going to number page 13 with this Ironbreaker.
Yep.
I love that Ironbreaker helmet with like the metal like mustache
cover
armor. I don't know.
I think this is one of the most successful depictions of how heavily armored Gromril would look while still looking sort of realistic and like they could move in it. Where I think when it got into the later like 8th edition stuff and then like, into Age of Sigmar where it's like they just look like they're tin cans and it's kind of goofy and cartoony.
Yeah,
this
they
still
look like
has
they're
that.
Robots.
Yeah, this still has that like grounded, realistic, ancient medieval Iron Age even kind of a look to them. Totally agree.
But no, I just love that helmet. So I just wanted to point it out. I think that's like one of my favorite helmets of all time.
Nice. All right. We are to the end of this. We've got our overall thoughts here. Like I said, this was my dream army as a kid. I'm so grateful to have one now. There's just so many fluffy, fun units. The models are just absolutely killer sculpts, full of character. You can just really tell the hand sculpted nature of all these faces and the little details you'll see on them, having tankards hanging off their belts or pipes and pouches and things.
They were a labor of love for sure. I think whoever was doing it really had a passion for what they were doing.
Definitely.
Sometimes you get these like same era, you see like monopose goblins and stuff. And I know a lot of people love those monopose goblins, but it's like, compared to a few years later with what you see in this book and in probably the 5th ed dwarf time frame, absolutely on a different level.
Yeah. And that being said, things like the metal longbeards, there's only maybe 3 or 4 different variations of the rank and file guys.
Sure.
And that's just how it was in this era when you didn't have modular stuff.
But then you
that's
had
enough.
Unique command probably. So
it's enough to give you the vibe, and when you rearrange them throughout the unit, it still creates the effect for sure. I would say overall the list is pretty limited in terms of play styles.
Yes.
But it does play quite a bit different from other armies. So I think that it does feel distinct in the array of armies available, because it does the gunline defensive strategy better than anybody else. And so even though other armies can play that way, these guys just do it best. And so I like that. But yeah, it's very much a sit and wait kind of style that lends itself to the gunline, like you said. And you really want to be paring down the attackers, getting down their static combat res through reducing rank bonuses and things before they hit home to just lessen the chances of you losing by a lot in those first rounds of combat.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it can be a little bit mono build. Maybe that's a little extreme. It can be a little bit, it pushes you in a direction.
Yeah, you can build it a lot of different ways, but all those ways will play pretty similar.
Right. And that's just because of the fact that there's movement 3. That's really it. If there was something in here that was faster, they would probably open up an opportunities. But then we were even talking about this a few days ago before recording. It's like, well, then are they still dwarves? Then, I think things like Kings of War or whatever added like dwarf cavalry. And sure, it's like they're slower than normal cavalry, but it's like, should dwarves have cavalry? Are they known more by their deficiencies than by their strengths? Or is it the mixture of both for kind of what makes an army unique?
Yeah. And I think for the dwarfs here, it feels like it errs on the side of unique.
Yeah.
Because of that toughness 4 and that leadership 9.
Yeah.
And so again, it makes them the best at this play style and this approach, which makes me not feel as bad about those gaps in the army list that feel like, oh, I'm missing this type of unit, or I don't have the skirmishers, don't have the cavalry. But that's fine because I'm toughness 4, leadership 9.
Yeah.
And I have infantry that can get a 2-up save.
Yeah. Yes. I think if you're looking to get into fantasy and you're a new player or you're a prospective player just looking at dwarves or dwarfs, I would say that this is an army to not go into expecting you're going to cause a lot of kills. I would say it's going to be more like Empire, where most of your killing is going to be done at range. And then when you wipe units, it's not going to be because you wiped out 5 guys in a combat. It's going to be because you wiped 2 and they didn't do anything.
Right. And then you win the combat by combat res, and probably don't run them down because you're -1.
Right.
But
And you hope you do or whatever. But that's going to be the sort of army this is. It's going to be a lot of grinding. There's going to be a lot of times where you're going to be in combat for multiple rounds, potentially losing those combats, but holding multiple rounds in a row. And you got to be okay with that.
That being said, I would say that it's on the easier side for a beginner
I
player
agree.
because it's so forgiving in that way.
Yeah.
So maybe it isn't the most dynamic or exciting play style. And so if that's what you're looking for, then I wouldn't recommend it as your first army. But if you are okay with those things that Grant you just pointed out, then I think it's a beginner friendly army because it's forgiving.
Sure, as long as you just come in with the right expectations. If you're not just like thinking my guys are so killy, they're going to show up and they're going to wipe the guys up. That's not what they're going to do. This isn't Corn Beastmen or something. Or Corn anything. This is much more stalwart. You're going to slowly grind people down. You're going to win your combats by weakening them before they get to you, and then you just kind of win over time. But I agree. I think they're an easier army because their stats are so strong. I think I'm kind of starting to line up with, if your core units just are really aggressively statted, you're probably going to be a good learning army. Yeah. Whereas say like Empire, or as I'm starting to think more and more like High Elves or something, or probably any of the elf armies, they're a lot more punishing because you might be on the receiving end of a combat where you lose 5 or 6 guys a lot more regularly.
Yeah.
And
so you've got to be a lot more careful about how you're using things.
Exactly. Whereas this, you can just kind of be like, even your shooting units, your Thunderers, like we talked about, they can kind of hold up and melee a little bit. Yeah. So it's like, even if your shooting units get charged when you weren't expecting for some reason, they might be okay. Yeah. Maybe, probably not, but maybe. And I think that's something that's really unique. But overall, I think they're an army that I could. My problem is I could say this about every army at this point, Cam. I could have a dwarf army and I would love playing the dwarfs. But I could say that about every army at this point. That's the problem with fantasy with me over time is I've just fought, and listeners, hopefully you guys agree. I feel like this game has such great variety, but also captures the core tenets of like traditional fantasy races. I don't know, like Tolkien-esque stuff.
Yeah.
But they're all so unique. Like, yeah, we got elves and we got evil elves and we got elves in the woods and we got dwarves and we got dwarves in the kind of evil dwarves and all this. And it's like, oh, you just explain it that way. It sounds kind of lame, but it's like as soon as you dive in, there's so much richness to all of this.
Yeah.
And it gets so exciting just to think about. And I just thinking about like doing this review, I'm like, oh man, I want to like line up with a bunch of iron breakers and have my slayers on the flank and then have a cannon in the middle on the hill, and I'm just pumping lead downfield, and I could see that being really exciting. And I think a lot of people get excited about war machines too. This is kind of the war machine faction aside from
they've
Empire.
Got some more reliable options, especially with some of the runes, but also some of those cool experimental options if you want to just do weird stuff.
So if you like all that too, I would say this would be a cool army to pick up and play. But overall, I think they're potentially very powerful, but also can play down, and just be okay with wanting to integrate shooting and all that, I would say. Yeah.
And I think the only potential trouble for a new player would be their
deployment,
lack of speed. Yeah. So because they're so slow, deployment matters more because it's harder to redeploy or fix some mistakes in your deployment after the game starts. But that just forces you to get good at deployment quicker. So maybe it's a good thing.
I could see them being a little weaker at smaller point games too, just because they're expensive per guy. So at a 500 point, like getting your toes wet sort of game, and you
just
play
take
against
all dwarf warriors.
I guess you're probably right. But like if you weren't just doing that and you took some diversity, I could see you having a very small force versus say Empire, and then they just have twice as many guns.
They can just totally surround you.
Yeah. Or even if you just go all melee, then you're completely surrounded. So, but as the games get bigger, I think they get better. So.
Cool. Well, that's all we have to say about the dwarfs. We hope that if you played with the dwarfs, you let us know what your experience with this book has been. Like we mentioned, our next episode will be providing you with a comparison of all the changes that came in the 6.5 dwarf book and kind of explain what the situation is with why there's 2 dwarf books for 6th edition.
Yeah.
But until next time, this has been Refused Flank.
Bye.
Bye.